Kane, once a slave and now serving as an imperial guard, drew his final breaths as he stood valiantly between danger and the emperor, an emperor driven to madness by a deal struck with a demon, whom Kane protected with unwavering loyalty until his dying moment. As the end approached, Kane's thoughts turned to the legacy he would leave behind. He questioned whether future generations would honor him as a steadfast knight who remained loyal to the very last, or if they would dismiss him as an imprudent man, unable to recognize the changing tides of his era. He found himself uninterested in both choices. Hallo, the weary and frustrated commander of the rebel forces, confronted Kane and demanded an explanation for his sudden decision to alter the direction of his blade during the pivotal instant. Kane thought that fading away from everyone's thoughts would be the best outcome. After spending 29 years as an orphan, he saw this destiny as something he had chosen for himself. He then spoke to the young master of the Duke's household, whom he addressed politely, requesting that there be no unnecessary conflict. Hello's cries of anguish filled the air, as she demanded to know why he had chosen to stay rather than escape. She wrapped her arms around him in his final moments, desperately begging for him to awaken and get back up. After his life ended, Kane wandered through an otherworldly realm that looked like an endless sea beneath a sky filled with countless stars, questioning whether he had truly entered the afterlife. He realized that the independence he had longed for was not as amazing as he once thought it would be. While he reflected on the word, hello, memories surfaced of the times he had shed tears for him. He tried to convince himself that his friend could handle things alone. A sudden surge of force hit him with intense power. Without warning, his spirit found itself inhabiting the fragile form of a newly born infant. He listened as a man's voice greeted him, introducing the world as Karen. Kane stood frozen, unable to process what was happening, as an old man appeared before him. An older man, who resembled Hello but appeared more mature, embraced him warmly and praised his bravery for staying strong without shedding any tears. He hoped his youngest grandson would grow up strong and healthy. The overwhelming surprise made baby Karen cry loudly. Deep within himself, he came to the startling realization that he now lived a new life as grandson. 45 years had passed since those events. In the present, Karen, a 10-year-old and the sole heir of Count Bali, who himself was the third son of Halo, sat attentively as he learned about history. The instructor discussed how present-day historians perceive the knight Kane, who perished alongside the wicked emperor. The instructor pointed out that, even though Kane was unable to stop his master from choosing a dark path, he is still remembered as an emblem of faithfulness for remaining loyal to his master until the very last moment. The teacher turned to Karen, seeking his thoughts on the matter. Karen approached the teacher and sought out what he thought about the matter. The teacher explained the commonly accepted opinion, expressing the belief that Grand Duke Hallo aimed to reclaim the reputation of his dear friend, referencing the well-known tale that illustrated the strength of their bond. Karen, however, caught the teacher off guard by expressing an opinion that was entirely unexpected. He expressed his belief that his grandfather, Hallo, harbored a deep dislike for his deceased friend, and that this animosity led Hallo to intentionally enhance Kane's legacy and speak highly of him. The teacher's eyes widened in astonishment at Kane's statement, prompting her to seek clarification about his intentions. Karen shared his thoughts, believing that his grandfather was unable to pardon Kane for opting for death rather than standing with him in the fight for change. In doing so, Kane's desire to pass away peacefully, without being turned into a symbol, was disregarded. The teacher's surprise was evident, yet memories of unofficial accounts surfaced, which claimed that the clash between Hallo and Kane had concluded far too swiftly, despite both possessing similar abilities. The teacher came to understand that, when viewed as Kane intentionally selecting death rather than battling his companion, his reasoning grew highly persuasive. He found himself astonished that someone as young as 10 could arrive at such a deep and insightful conclusion. The teacher grew visibly anxious, internally worrying that endorsing such a bold statement could lead the Duke's knights to execute him for offending the nobility. Caught off guard, he hesitated and confessed that this perspective had never crossed his mind, which prompted Karen to break into sudden laughter. Karen admitted that he had only been joking, feeling curious about the reason behind his teacher's astonished reaction. Once more focused on his present circumstances, reminding himself that he was now known as the youngest grandson belonging to the noble family of Duke. After taking a moment to process everything, he slowly understood that he had been reincarnated as the grandson of Hollow. He fumed inwardly, unable to comprehend how that idiot had the nerve to cast him as a hero when he had made it clear he wanted no such thing. The expectation had been obvious, even without words. Later on, Karen came across Bali, who was the youngest son of Halo and also Karen's father, as he knelt in prayer. When his lesson concluded, Karen walked over to him. He turned to his father, wanting to know whether any concern lingered in his mind about the approaching awakening ceremony. Bali expressed regret to his son, feeling troubled by the thought that he might have passed down his own shortcomings. When Karen questioned him, Bali revealed his worry that, unlike his brothers who had awakened their magical abilities, he himself never had, and feared his son might share the same fate. Karen offered his father comforting words, expressing with certainty that, regardless of others' opinions, he considered him the greatest father he could ever have. Bali felt a surge of emotion as his son's words reached him. Overcome with tears, he wrapped his arms around his son and assured him that he, too, was the most wonderful son a father could have. He then asked him with warmth in his voice what he would like to have for dinner. Karen, expressing his excitement, immediately declared that he wanted meat naturally. In his bedroom, Karen lay lost in thought, her mind focused on the upcoming awakening ceremony. Recollections from his previous existence as Cain resurfaced in his mind. He recalled a time when he spoke with a young member of the Halo family who was unfamiliar with the idea of an awakening ceremony. The Halo had told him that it was a long-standing tradition in their family, meant to release hidden magical abilities. Cain dismissed the notion with a scoff, showing no interest in abilities granted by privilege at birth. Hullo clarified that awakening one's abilities was not guaranteed for everyone, and even among those who succeeded, it did not ensure leadership of the family. Hullo attempted to capture Cain's curiosity by mentioning a remarkable secret that was exclusively entrusted to the head of the family. Cain wondered aloud whether the secret might be a valuable treasure or perhaps an enchanted book capable of granting wishes, and Hullo confirmed that it was. Cain confessed he was a little curious, but revealed that what he truly wanted was a peaceful life hidden away from everyone else. After Hullo found his dream amusing, laughter escaped her lips. Cain feigned irritation in response to his friend's joke, prompting Hullo to earnestly vow that if he ever rose to the position of family head, he would break tradition just for Cain and reveal the secret. Karen's mind shifted back to the present moment while he sat quietly in his room, reflecting on the upcoming ceremony where his magical abilities would be revealed. He reassured himself, believing there was nothing for his father to be concerned about. Blue sparks and crackling lightning formed around him, exposing the secret that his magical abilities had been awakened a long time before. In a subsequent moment, Karen stood alongside his parents, his eyes wide with wonder as he gazed at a sleek, modern train. It was a sight he had never encountered before, and his astonishment clearly showed as he took in the impressive technology before him. Bali's mother explained with pride that numerous technologies involved in building the train had become widely available because of Bali's father's own support and investment. The father attempted to minimize his accomplishment, displaying modesty, yet his mother remained firm in her praise, declaring it truly remarkable. Karen nodded in agreement and earnestly expressed how deeply he admired his father. As the train rattled along the tracks, Karen's mind lingered on his father. He felt a deep admiration for the man who, even without the gift of magic, had become a remarkable figure by efficiently handling nearly a third of the duchy's finances all on his own. He grew up surrounded by the warmth of a loving mother and the unwavering dedication of a father who always put his family first. Karen came to believe that they embodied the ideal of perfect parents. The train pressed forward along its route. Karen gazed out the window and noticed an enormous castle rising on the horizon. This grand structure served as the primary home of the family. The scene unfolded at castle. Karen experienced a blend of eagerness and frustration as memories of his grandfather. Hollow, being in that location filled his mind. Internally, he felt a surge of anger rise within him. Hollow had taken it upon himself to immortalize him as a legendary figure, leaving him puzzled as to how anyone could force such a legacy upon someone without their consent. At that instant, Karen let out a faint pulse of magic, which stirred his father from sleep. In that instant, Karen resolved to relentlessly bother his grandfather from that day forward. He aimed to become the most notorious troublemaker the family had ever seen. In his thoughts, Karen silently made a promise to his grandfather. He advised him to be patient and watch how his beloved youngest grandson, who was currently on his way, would handle the situation. As the train pulled into the station, a group of people waited eagerly to welcome the newcomers. Karen's father greeted a man named, who, in return, warmly acknowledged the endless kindness shown by the Duke's family. Karen's gaze was drawn to the knights who were stationed nearby. He realized that these knights stood out from those he was used to seeing in his own homeland. He questioned whether others had sensed the mana he had already stirred, yet the idea of this information eventually reaching his grandfather did not concern him, as he believed it was inevitable. The family made their way into the heart of the castle, led by their guide. Karen was led into a large reception hall and instructed to remain there as Count departed to welcome the senior members of the family. Karen sat in the spacious room, her mind wandering as she tried to find something to occupy her time. He regretted not choosing to visit the library instead. Without warning, a different boy in the room broke into his thoughts, jeering that the gossip had been right all along. Karen truly was obsessed with books, since the very first thing he requested after arriving was to see the library. The boy proceeded to mock both Karen and his father, claiming that because Karen came from his uncle Bali's bloodline, he had little hope of awakening mana. According to the boy, it would be wiser for Karen to focus on studying and earning a living just like ordinary people, following in his father's footsteps. Karen felt a surge of anger at the insult, yet she managed to keep her composure as she questioned the boy about whether he was looking for a fight. The boy, caught off guard by her calm response, quickly mustered a bit of mana, deciding to let Karen take the advantage. Karen, remaining composed, speculated internally about the possibility of a mischievous child being brought up in the main residence. Then, without warning, he released a surge of his own mana, causing the boy to stand frozen in shock. The boy, clearly astonished, wondered aloud about the timing and method behind Karen's awakening of his mana. In response, Karen simply smiled and explained that even his father was unaware of the details. Karen turned to his cousin, whom he affectionately called brother, and explained that a problem had arisen. Karen declared that the family only needed one troublemaker, insisting he would claim that position himself. He demanded that the other step aside, causing his cousin to stand rooted to the spot, paralyzed by fear. Karen emanated an intimidating presence that filled the space, then proposed to his cousin Leo that they should engage in a quick battle. In another part of the castle, Tiles, the oldest uncle, gathered with his younger brothers. News reached that had successfully awakened his mana, a fact that the third knight commander. Raphael, the second uncle, remarked on how had concealed the awakening of his mana from the main family. He wondered aloud about the motives of their brother Bali, whom he dismissed as unsuccessful. Bali's expression showed true surprise, making it clear he was just as clueless. Meanwhile, Tiles chastised his brother Raphael for acting too quickly, reminding him that it made sense for someone who hadn't awakened mana, like himself, to be unaware of such things. The entire situation was then characterized as utterly pitiable. Without warning, a servant rushed into the room, clearly distressed, and urged the head butler to hurry and follow him. The servant raised his voice, searching the halls as he tried to get Raphael's attention. Hallow quietly remarked that there had been some sort of mix-up. Understood that the conversation concerned his son, and he rose to his feet, anger flashing across his face. At the same time, inside the reception room, Leo lay sprawled across the floor, clearly overcome. Raphael entered, and upon witnessing the situation, seized Karen with a surge of anger. She referred to him as a disrespectful youngster. She inquired about his thoughts. Just then, Bali and Tiles showed up. Karen responded with composure, explaining that her actions were due to Leo's disrespectful remarks about his father. Karen questioned inwardly, in the presence of his uncle, whether his uncle would have chosen to stay quiet if their roles had been switched. Insisted that Karen's words made no sense. He seized Karen and faced Bali, ordering him to be quiet and blaming him for everything, saying it was all the result of his inability to properly raise his son. At that instant, the head butler stepped in and requested that the group cease their actions. The news spread that the master of the house would personally decide the outcome. Raphael received instructions to release his hold on Karen, and although he hesitated, he eventually. Bali hurried over to his son, concerned for his well-being, while Karen calmly let him know that everything was all right. Following that event, the head butler summoned everyone to meet with the master of the household. They made their way along the lengthy hallway. Karen reflected inwardly, realizing it had been quite a while since he had last encountered Hello. As soon as they stepped into the study, Hello, seated at his desk, fixed his gaze on Karen and immediately demanded an explanation for the major trouble he had stirred up right after getting there. Bali attempted to stand up for his son, but Hello quickly cut him off with a firm tone, making it clear that he had not sought Bali's input. He would learn the truth straight from his son. Hello assured Karen that he trusted his son not to act carelessly or get into trouble without considering the results, and then requested that his son explain his actions in detail. Karen felt a quiet shock at how Hello chose to hear him out before deciding on any punishment, thinking to himself that this behavior was an oddly misplaced act of chivalry. Karen restated his response in a clear voice, explaining that Leo had shown disrespect to his father. Lost his temper once more, leveling accusations at Karen and insisting that she come clean. In response, Hello brought his fist down hard on the desk and shouted for her to hold his tongue, astonished by his boldness to speak so loudly before him. Offered his father an apology, greeting him politely. The person in charge made the decision to have Leo brought in to verify the truth, and told to escort him over immediately after his medical care was completed. Before moving on, Hello shifted his focus toward Karen, making it clear that he had more on his mind than just the issue of the insult. Karen, already expecting what his grandfather would ask, responded with a bright and confident tone. He revealed that he had awakened his mana 3 years earlier, leaving everyone around him stunned by the news. Halo questioned the boy's decision to keep the secret from his own father for so long, silently marveling at how someone so young could have discovered Mana's power without any help. Karen revealed that he had only discovered the energy was Mana after coming across the information in a book sometime afterward. When his grandfather urged him to explain what occurred after that point, Karen offered an innocent smile, explaining that he preferred to keep the matter hidden. He remarked that having secrets brought excitement, especially since the knights in his area remained completely unaware. Hello inquired whether that was everything, to which Karen responded with a bright affirmation. Just then, Leo showed up with fresh bandages covering his injuries. Wasted no time and questioned him right away, wanting to know whether Leo had truly spoken disrespectfully to his uncle. Karen launched into an exaggerated display, pretending to be deeply hurt as she recounted Leo's harsh words about his father. She painted Leo's father as a crude person, obsessed with wealth and nothing else. Shifting the focus, Karen spoke of his own father, calling him useless and full of himself, and questioned how much sorrow he would actually feel if his father passed away without ever understanding the truth. He finished his speech by acknowledging that, no matter what had happened, striking Leo was wrong, and he had done something deeply regrettable. Leo's face contorted in shock and disgust as he listened to the warped accusation, quickly insisting that he had never uttered such words. In response, Karen unleashed a surge of his power, the force radiating outwards in an attempt to cow his cousin into submission. Leo greeted them with a quiet question, wanting to know if Karen's statement was correct, and after a moment of hesitation, Leo nervously confirmed that it was indeed the truth. Following the confession, Hello realized that the awakening ceremony was scheduled for the following day, so he chose to delay the punishment for both boys until after the event and instructed them to get some rest. Later that night, sought out his servant to hear what he thought about Bali's son. Responded with careful words, suggesting that the boy possessed several qualities that could capture the master's attention. Hullo concurred, noting that Karen seemed to be a fascinating young man. He had not only discovered his own mana and kept it a secret for 3 years, but he had also quietly pointed out the shortcomings of the knights serving under his father's rule. Hallo interpreted this as a subtle reminder of how little attention he had given his own son, Bali. While believed his master was reading too much into the situation, Hallo remained convinced that this particular grandson was unique. A greeting was offered, as the group prepared to uncover the real Karen hidden beneath her facade. The following day, everyone wondered if he would reveal something extraordinary during the ceremony. He wondered intensely if he would make it through the ceremony without any trouble. Later that night, he considered the benefits he might receive from his actions. The whole family assembled outside, readying themselves for the upcoming ceremony. As Karen looked around, she spotted the elders dressed in ceremonial robes, and she could sense the strong presence they still held, even though they were no longer active leaders. He noticed that every family member was there, including Tiles with his daughter, as well as Raphael accompanied by his son Leo. Karen came to understand that the ceremony held greater significance than he had previously believed. At the heart of the assembly stood a stone platform, topped by a massive black rock that Karen instantly identified as the Oath Stone. Hello signaled the beginning of the eye-opening ritual, describing how would step through the rift created by the Oath Stone and find himself transported into a world revealed by the stone. He went on to clarify that each individual experiences this world differently, and the ritual would conclude once Karen destroyed her version of it using the weapon of clear understanding he was destined to find. Once Karen was certain that he was prepared, Hello picked up a necklace and used it to trigger the Oath Stone, causing a column of blue light to burst forth. A shimmering tear appeared in the air, radiating with an otherworldly light. Bali placed a trembling hand on his son's shoulder, his worry clear in his eyes as he searched for reassurance, wondering aloud if his son felt afraid and whether he would truly be all right. Karen comforted his father, expressing confidence in his own well-being and vowing that he would come back. Karen reflected on the mission he had been given, which involved destroying the world using a weapon he was yet to obtain. He felt confident, believing that causing destruction was something that came naturally to him. Watching from afar, Hullo silently hoped that his grandson would find the courage to face his fears. The moment Karen crossed the rift, he realized he was once again trapped in a place he recognized all too well, one that filled him with dread. The imperial palace stood engulfed in flames, its halls littered with the lifeless forms of his fallen comrades. He seethed with frustration, questioning the reason the stone forced him to relive such distressing moments from his past. There was uncertainty about whether the purpose was to burden him with guilt over the wrongful deaths of his fellow soldiers. Karen listened as an enigmatic voice echoed around him, painting his world as sorrowful and barren, and referring to him as the child of the Blue Wolf. The voice declared that the era of the Covenant had arrived, and insisted that Karen was destined to complete the promise once made by his forebear. Karen wondered aloud whether the mysterious voice belonged to a demon. The voice, however, rejected the idea, insisting that no wicked demon would ever have the courage to corrupt the noble blood flowing within him. Karen was encouraged by a mysterious voice to set aside his fears and claim the throne, promising that his deepest wishes would be fulfilled once he did. As arrived at the throne, she realized it was the very seat the emperor had tried so fiercely to safeguard, resorting even to making a pact with a demon. As he ascended the staircase, a chilling sensation crept over him, as though each step took him across the bodies of those lost. Memories flooded his mind, and he realized he had never expected that this would be the reason for their demise. He discovered his former weapon inside the room. The voice greeted him, acknowledging his status as a member of the Blue Wolf clan. She explained to him that this object was meant to be his weapon. Instantly spotted the cherished weapon he had received from the Emperor, a sinister blade known as Ruin. The mysterious voice requested that he channel his mana into it, however, protested, warning that the sword consumes the soul of whoever wields it. The voice calmly explained to him that his grandfather had already destroyed the evil spirit that once resided within the sword, and what he now saw was only a twisted remnant left behind by the demon's curse. He alone possessed the power to bring it to life. Karen paused, uncertain about whether it was wise to lay a hand on the sword, haunted by memories of his former self who had blindly served the Emperor and ended many lives. Just then, Hallow's voice resonated within his thoughts, encouraging him to face his fears. Karen at last realized why Hello always showed such uncommon kindness. The eye-opening ritual served a greater purpose than simply granting a weapon. It was designed so that the chosen heir, upon awakening the mana of clear insight, could confront and conquer their deepest fear. With this new insight, Karen extended his hand toward his sword with renewed confidence. The moment's fingers closed around the sword, a powerful surge of blue energy, one that he instantly identified as the mana of clear insight, rushed through him. In his grasp, the sword slowly transformed, its form shifting before his eyes. A cryptic voice admitted uncertainty about why the sword had manifested before him as it once was ruin. The explanation revealed that the sword had once been owned by his ancestor. According to the voice, this sword was absent from historical records because, unlike Graham, the sword taken by Hallow, its abilities were of an entirely different kind from those associated with the family. Karen was overwhelmed by sharp agony when the dormant mana within the sword started carving its presence into his body, yet a commanding voice insisted that he withstand the torment. Karen observed that the energy coursing through his body was growing increasingly wild and intense. He inquired of the voice, seeking to learn the real name of the sword. The mysterious voice explained that this weapon was known as the execution sword guillotine, a legendary blade famous for cutting down innumerable demons and absorbing their strength. The demons became so terrified that they completely erased all memory of its existence from their minds. Karen reflected on the fresh name he had given to his weapon. The voice observed that a blade mirroring the dark depths of the ocean was an ideal match for Karen's fate. Karen wondered aloud about who the voice belonged to, suspecting it could be the blue dragon that protected their home. However, the voice informed her that she was not strong enough yet to learn its real name. He extended an invitation for a future visit to the North Sea, suggesting that, when he eventually possessed the power to command the oceans, he should come see it himself. Once the conversation ended, Karen wondered about the way to escape this world. The mysterious voice responded by implying that Karen already possessed the knowledge he sought. Karen came to understand his task. He needed to break the world, just as he had been instructed when the ritual first began. Feeling a surge of excitement, he expressed that this was something he had always been eager to attempt. He brought the sword down with great force, causing the illusionary world surrounding him to break apart. In reality, Halo offered comfort to Bali, who was feeling uneasy. He acknowledged the deep ache a father feels when he watches his son choose a journey he himself was unable to take. He emphasized that such times tested a person's determination. Without warning, the oath stone split apart with fierce, jagged cracks, causing Leo to cry out and warn his grandfather that the stone was shattering. Amid widespread astonishment, the stone broke apart entirely. Karen materialized in a burst of brilliance at the spot where the shattered stone once rested, gripping his newly acquired sword. He glanced about the room, a grin on his face, and wondered aloud about the fate of the oath stone. She observed that it was damaged. Bali approached him with anger, insisting on an explanation for his actions. Lifted the sword with enthusiasm, declaring to everyone that it was the execution sword guillotine once owned by their ancestor. The words left both Hello and the elders in shock. The legendary sword had been wiped from their family's records, with knowledge of it surviving only through spoken tales shared among the patriarch and elders. Everyone questioned the sudden appearance, while Hello silently considered if the era of the covenant was drawing near. Hello eventually turned to his grandson and questioned whether the sight of the sword frightened him. Karen, showing absolute certainty, assured his grandfather that he was not afraid at all. Once the greeting was exchanged, Hello took a moment to understand what was happening. He started reflecting on the distant past, recalling how, generations ago, his forebears had forged an alliance with the blue dragons to wipe out the demons. As a symbol of their agreement, they placed the oath stone and departed. The promise lingered in anticipation, hoping for a future descendant who would finally see it through. Hello gazed at his grandson, Karen, his thoughts swirling with curiosity about whether this young boy might be the chosen one to complete what had been started so long ago. In response, lifted his hand and made an official proclamation. He recognized the child of Bali as the chosen bearer of the execution sword known as guillotine. With this announcement, affirmed status as a rightful member of Castle and acknowledged him as a direct successor, entitled to undergo the initiation rituals. Raphael felt a surge of anger at the suggestion, refusing to support giving those rights to someone he considered an insolent child. At the same time, Bali hurried over to his son to make sure he was safe, yet Karen quickly let him know that the boy hadn't been hurt. Tiles, the oldest uncle, pondered quietly, realizing that the legendary sword was completely unfamiliar to him. Its aura by itself sent a shiver down the spine. Tiles mentally cautioned his brother Bali, making it clear that he refused to let the question of succession be influenced by the unexpected presence of his own son, despite the fact that Karen was now forging a trail that no one else had ever dared to take. Once the ceremony concluded, Hello announced its end and instructed everyone to go back to their previous activities. As they prepared to go, Raphael turned to Tiles with frustration, demanding to know if his older brother intended to do nothing. Tiles responded in a composed manner, assuring that they would have a conversation together before long. Realized that the threat was so obvious that even Tiles, known for his greed, sensed it. Struggled to understand the situation, his frustration growing as he questioned the decision to select Bali's son above everyone else. Tiles reminded him that avoiding conflict within their group was the top priority at that moment. As the moment arrived for his parents to depart, Bali turned to his son, his voice filled with worry, and inquired whether the boy would manage by himself. Offered comfort by explaining that Castle offered the greatest protection. Bali acknowledged that no danger loomed from outside the castle walls, yet he could not shake his concern about the risks that might arise from within. He noted that his brothers were always careful to behave properly whenever their father was around. Walked over to the group and let them know that lady had been chosen to supervise Karen's initiation ceremony. Karen and his father experienced a sense of relief. The younger sibling had earned a reputation for possessing abilities that matched those of her brothers, which led others to call her the White Wolf. Bali encouraged his son to treat her with respect, and Karen assured him that he would do so. Before departing, delivered Halo's last message. The king announced that a home within the castle would be arranged for Bali's family, allowing them to come and go whenever they wished. Bali felt a surge of emotion at his father's thoughtful act, and expressed his gratitude too, assuring him that he was now able to depart without any lingering worries. He said goodbye to his son, reminding him to look after himself, and reassuring him that he could always come to his father for help. Once the train had left the station, guided Karen down the castle's grand corridors, explaining that Lady was expecting him. Just before they reached their destination, paused to offer Karen some guidance. He was instructed not to refer to Lady as grandmother, since she had a strong dislike for that title. Karen expressed her gratitude for the advice, but he silently questioned its odd nature in his mind. The group soon reached the spirit training hall hidden within forest, a location reserved exclusively for members of the direct bloodline. Informed Karen that Lady awaited him inside, mentioning as well that Lord Leo was present. At his father's specific urging, Raphael. Hearing the news brought Karen joy, and she stepped through the doorway. Silently observed, anticipating that the situation would soon become loud once more. Before stepping inside, Karen sensed an overwhelming surge of mana radiating from the hall. As he pushed the door open, he called out to let the White Wolf know he had arrived, but before he could step inside, a commanding voice from within instructed him to come in immediately. Karen found himself taken aback by how young Lady appeared. Upon greeting him, she inquired whether her looks differed from what he had expected. Observed that time had flown by, noticing that Bali's beloved son was already grown. Karen quickly understood that the reason for her ageless appearance was the reconstruction of her body through mana, a rare skill reserved for those who had achieved the rank of 8-star master. Instructed Karen to take a seat beside Leo, asking her to cross her legs. Karen did as she was asked and leaned in to quietly assure his anxious cousin that they would be spending much more time together from now on, expressing his anticipation for it. Observed that he was already familiar with her title. Karen explained that he had learned about it from history books, which he enjoyed reading. Smiled, agreeing with her brother Hello's description, and admitted that the boy was certainly interesting. When Karen inquired about what the boy's grandfather had mentioned, she passed along his words, mentioning that he was a boy she believed would be very likable, and after meeting him in person, she realized exactly why. Remembered her discussion with Hello, during which Hello had likened Karen to a young girl destined to journey over an endless ocean. He requested that she become his guiding light, leading the way so he might one day command the vast ocean. Recognized in Karen a boundless potential, vast and untamed like the endless ocean. Despite his lack of refinement, there was a possibility that he could eventually become a leader for his whole generation. She thought of her encounter with the intriguing boy as a source of entertainment. Started the lesson by telling the students that sitting with their legs crossed formed the basis for developing mana. She went on to say that after they moved beyond the beginner stage, they would eventually be able to control mana without having to remain seated. At the same moment, she does the same. She unleashed a surge of transparent sea mana, leaving the boys in awe. Described how the Sea Overlord method worked, revealing that it involved forming a vast sea of mana inside the body and learning to master its flow. She clarified that an individual's power grows with every ocean they command. Holding sway over 8 separate oceans elevates someone to the esteemed status known as 8 stars. However, uniting all 8 oceans into a single, immense sea is an achievement reserved for those who attain the legendary 9-star rank. She explained that throughout the whole continent, just 3 individuals had ever achieved this rank, with only a single person attaining it within the empire. In that moment, Karen understood at once that the person being described could only be his own grandfather. With this realization, he greeted her. Acknowledged that her brother held the distinction of being the continent's sole 9-star expert. Karen felt a surge of resolve burn within him as he silently promised himself that, in this lifetime, he would surely reach the heights his grandfather had achieved. Observed that the boy was driven by a powerful longing for control. She found his antics genuinely entertaining and decided he had the potential to be a worthy student. Initiated the mana training by instructing the boys to direct their mana into the pathways that had been unlocked during the awakening ceremony. She reminded them that mana's strength was not meant to be mastered through force, but rather embraced with acceptance. Observed the patterns of their carefully, while Karen realized that his remained somewhat uneven. She directed him to begin with the heart. Found herself astonished by Karen's skill, unable to believe that such strength belonged to someone who had only recently completed the awakening ceremony. She drew a mental comparison between him and Leo, noting that Leo, despite obtaining the Sea Overlord method 2 years prior, had only just started making progress toward reaching the 2-star rank. Unlike others who needed guidance, Karen naturally began shaping his own mana paths, relying on his instincts alone. Karen experienced a crushing force, making it seem like his entire body was being ripped to shreds. He decided to cease his personal cultivation efforts. First assumed that Leo's tired body had reached its limit, but she soon noticed he was cleverly controlling his speed. Just then, Leo fell to the ground, having drained too much of his mana. Hurried over to his side, chastising him for pushing his mana beyond its limits. Realized that her attention had wandered because she had been observing Karen. Karen believed that adults were responsible for keeping children safe from their own impulsive actions. As she turned to Leo, her expression was filled with disappointment, and she regarded his behavior as disgraceful. Thought about how Leo differed from Karen, remembering that Karen had recognized her own boundaries and had avoided injury by stopping in time. She admired the way he managed to restrain himself, even though he clearly longed for power. The thought crossed their mind, questioning whether this boy truly required the guidance of a lighthouse. Assured Karen that she would protect him for the next 3 years. She encouraged him to concentrate on increasing his strength during this time, emphasizing the importance of self-protection. Karen responded with eager agreement. Later, the setting shifted to the area designated for dueling practice. Leo walked up to Karen, wondering aloud whether Karen intended to wield the guillotine sword during their training session. Karen responded, her tone questioning whether there was any issue with her answer, and she went on to clarify that his grandfather had gifted him a unique scabbard designed to hold back the sword's powerful energy. The new instructor walked up to the group, letting them know he would be the one to teach the boys how to use swords. Held the esteemed position of commander among the Sea Wolf Knights. Karen offered Sir a courteous greeting, all the while observing that the man possessed the formidable skills of an 8-star expert. Informed the boys that he would refrain from calling them young master until they had proven themselves worthy in the eyes of the knights. Karen responded without hesitation, expressing his comfort with the situation. He acknowledged his understanding that, as part of the family, it was customary to gain the Blue Wolves' respect by demonstrating skill. Notice that responded in a way he hadn't expected, realizing that most nobles in her position would have taken offense. At first, Sir believed that, after many years of anticipation, the family had finally gained a dedicated and reliable successor. Karen felt certain that, sooner or later, everyone would end up submitting to him. As soon as sensed the presence of this aura, he quickly reconsidered his decision. After careful observation, it became clear that the newcomer was not a legitimate successor. In fact, this individual was even more troublesome than Leo, a genuine troublemaker. At the same time, cautioned her brother Hullo, urging him to consider how Karen could affect the line of succession and the potential consequences for Hullo's son. Questioned inwardly whether his sister was suggesting that his son could be in danger because of his nephew. Then explained that if word of Karen's remarkable abilities spread across the empire, there could be serious consequences. Clearly, this decision would influence his successor and determine the events that would follow. Voiced her worries to her brother Hullo, fearing that the destruction of the Oath Stone could mean the end of their family, especially since demons from beyond the North Sea were appearing in greater numbers. Hullo rejected the notion, calling it foolish, and instead shared a hidden prophecy that was only known to the family's leader. According to this secret, whoever shattered the stone would have the power to create a new one, just as their forebear had done in the distant past. Understood that the arrival of the Covenant was fast approaching. She inquired about the timing of when he would inform Karen, and Hullo responded that he would do so when the moment felt appropriate. During the cold winter months, Bali sat quietly and read a letter that had arrived from his son, Karen. Karen sent a letter to his father, aiming to ease any worries about his health. In the message, he shared news of his recent achievements in training, including his success in mastering the 4th technique from 2 separate sword styles. He also explained that he was making an effort to get along with his family members just as his father had suggested, and he made sure to mention that he was looking after Leo with extra attention. When he finished the letter, he playfully mentioned that his funds were gone and hinted for a bit more money, causing Bali to chuckle warmly. During a discussion with, remembered feeling anxious when he had left Cairn behind at the castle 3 years earlier. Offered comfort by noting how easily had settled in, adding that the castle's silence had been replaced with liveliness thanks to his presence. Despite Bali's efforts to caution his son against drawing notice, responded thoughtfully, expressing the belief that a true gem would always stand out, no matter where it remained. Cautioned that circumstances could shift soon, since stopping the rumors about from circulating would quickly become impossible. As a blue wolf, he understood that he was expected to fulfill the duties given to him. Bali's greatest concern centered on how his brother would respond to the increasing sway Karen held over their lives. Gave Bali a final suggestion, pointing out that Lady held a special affection for Karen. Bali experienced a wave of relief upon receiving the news. Bali shared that he felt satisfied because the monthly allowance he provided had been worthwhile. In response, showed his relief and happiness, noting how glad he was to see Bali in good spirits and appearing more relaxed. Bali admitted his worry about his aunt's upcoming departure from the castle. Offered further comfort, clarifying that had grown so close to the knights that they had even come up with a special nickname for him. The small, wild blue dog from the sea. On the training field, Karen could be seen practicing with fierce determination, skillfully defeating a towering knight called Hans without much effort. Karen criticized him harshly, pointing out that mastering the sword meant nothing if he allowed himself to be overpowered. The story emphasized that, even when suffering from broken bones, a person must continue to battle with every ounce of their strength. Hans gave up, confessing that Karen alone had the ability to bring out his strength. At the same time, Karen teased him, ridiculing his muscles by comparing them to inflated balloons. On the training grounds, Hans confessed that he had never heard the phrase balloon muscles before. He realized that, without relying on mana, he could not compete with Karen anymore, and felt a sense of regret over how much stronger the young man had become in only a year. Hans informed Karen that he expected to be assigned a mission in the near future. Hans explained that the responsibility for determining when the mission would take place rested with Sir, since Halo was presently located in the capital. He guessed that they were heading toward the Celestial Dome area in the western part of the duchy, a place where reports of demon sightings had been on the rise. Close by, Leo practiced with a sense of unease, his thoughts filled with the hope that he would not be assigned to the same mission as Karen. While wanting to achieve success for himself, he also wished his accomplishments would bring joy to his parents. In the present moment, Bali disclosed that there was more to his summons than simply receiving Karen's letter. Bali handed him a small pouch and mentioned that gate inspectors from their territory had discovered it in a merchant's cart arriving from the barony of. Bali identified the substance as cocaine and requested that he begin his investigation into the barony at Blue Sea Castle. At the train station, the scene unfolds. A passenger stepped off the train, uncertain if they had arrived at the Blue Sea Castle. Later that evening, Karen roamed the castle grounds, having secretly entered and taken a bottle of liquor from stash. As he walked, he thought to himself how thrilling it always felt to tamper with prized collection. While he savored his beverage, the sound of a visitor's voice reached him, urgently inquiring with the guard about Duke. The guard responded by explaining that the Duke was currently away in the capital, leaving Knight Commander responsible in his absence. Karen suddenly broke into the discussion, making her presence known among the others. When the guard realized who stood before him, the visitor revealed his identity, presenting himself as the young Baron. Realized he had seen Karen before, recalling the stories others had shared about him. Despite Said recommending that they approach the Knight Commander, firmly declared his intention to hear story himself. The nobles insisted that someone of their own rank should greet the visitor in person, since the situation was urgent and basic manners demanded it. Karen instructed the guard to take a different message too. Found himself admiring the way Karen analyzed political situations. Felt uneasy when he noticed a young boy clutching a bottle of alcohol. He gestured for to come with him. Once they were alone in a separate chamber, explained the situation faced. A band of bandits had taken up residence in the eastern mountains of his barony. Agreed, explaining that the bandits were distributing illegal drugs and abducting individuals to be sold into slavery. His voice tinged with remorse, confessed that his barony suffered from poverty and lacked strong military forces. He recalled how his father's effort to drive out the bandits had ended in failure. The incident left him hurt and confined to his bed. Karen, furious, brought the liquor bottle down hard onto the table, her anger boiling over as she insisted that even ripping those villains apart would be too mild a retribution for their actions. He noted the strange fact that it seemed unlikely for just a small gang of bandits to possess enough strength to challenge an organized military force. Explained their suspicion that the bandits could, in fact, be former soldiers who had abandoned the Southern Kingdom's army, a force presently engaged in a war. Carefully assessed the circumstances and determined that, following the abdication of the wicked emperor, the imperial army had redirected its limited resources toward the southern conflict. which left the northern region vulnerable and lacking protection. The situation enabled former soldiers who had deserted to turn into bandits. Thought this explanation made the most sense. Extended a drink to, mentioning that the barony of bordered the land where his father lived, which meant that the situation held personal significance for him too. He revealed his wish to offer assistance directly, appreciated the kindness, but silently questioned whether it was right to accept a beverage from someone so young. Karen, with a bright smile, confessed that she had taken the drink from Sir Private Stash and requested that not tell anyone about it. Hearing the name of the well-known knight commander left stunned. Just then walked into the room and reminded Karen about their agreement that his drink was off-limits. The sudden entrance startled, causing him to accidentally knock over his own cup. Noticing his embarrassment, offered gentle words to calm him down. Turned to, acknowledging that word of serious worries regarding the bandits had reached him. Acknowledged that this was the very reason he had sought assistance. Just as prepared to answer, Karen cut him off. Faced Karen, chastising him for consuming alcohol at such a young age, and swiftly confiscated Karen's drink. Expressed regret to the young baron, feeling sorry for the commotion that had occurred. He assured the man that Blue Sea Castle would take action, and would never abandon an old ally in times of trouble. They informed him of their intentions to gather forces and send them out in the near future. Offered to take part in the mission, yet quickly declined her offer, explaining that the opponents were a professional team and could possess hidden, highly skilled members. Hadn't expected Karen to be so determined to offer her help, and her sincerity caught him off guard. Voiced his concerns, fully aware that facing actual battles was not the same as practicing in a controlled environment. Karen insisted that being overly protective could have negative consequences. Remained firm in his decision, believing it was better to send him toward a known threat in the west than to risk the uncertainties of an unclear menace. Upon hearing that, Karen's lips curled into a cunning smile as she wondered aloud what might happen if he were presented with an irresistible offer. At the train station some time later, Leo's surprise was evident as he realized he had no choice but to join the mission. Meanwhile, Karen, brimming with excitement over their debut assignment, threw an arm around him and beamed with joy. As observed the unfolding events, he came to the unsettling conclusion that Karen had deceived him, cleverly manipulating Lady to gain the upper hand. Considered that having a trustworthy protector join them might actually be the best outcome. Understood that by accepting the term of Lord Leo's participation, he was expressing his approval of how their training had turned out. Baron had come as well, standing among the others to bid them farewell. He felt a deep concern for the Duke's grandsons, anxious about their well-being and the burden his family would bear if anything happened to them. Attempted to calm him, insisting that he had nothing to be concerned about. He assured everyone that as long as was there, the boys would always be safe from danger. Abruptly cut him off and stunned everyone by announcing her decision not to get involved unless the boys' lives were truly at risk. And Leo felt a chill of fear after hearing the statement, while remarked on her characteristic boldness. Alluded to an undisclosed reason that kept her from joining the front lines. Appeared to grasp this concept and willingly acknowledged it. At the train station, observed that Leo was shaking. She acknowledged his anxiety, assuring him that she understood his fear. However, she encouraged him to view the mission as a chance to demonstrate the dedication he had shown throughout his 3 years of training, and to earn respect as a true member of the Blue Wolves. Karen, with his trademark sarcasm, questioned whether Leo was always in need of a push from someone else. In response, Leo's temper flared and he shot back with anger. Karen's encouragement stirred something inside him, reigniting his determination and making him understand that the moment had come for him to demonstrate his true abilities. The enchanted locomotive left Blue Sea Castle, beginning its journey toward the barony of. As the train pulled out of the station, Karen reflected inwardly, surprised by how suddenly this moment had arrived. While riding the train, shared with Baron the reasons she was unable to show herself on the battlefield. She revealed that her stay at Blue Sea Castle needed to remain hidden from others. If anyone found her, the bandits would vanish completely, leaving no evidence behind. Despite the plan, hesitated, uneasy about entrusting the mission to just two young people. His worry deepened when he observed that appeared completely calm, betraying no hint of nervousness. Leo appeared to be filled with nervous energy. At the same time, memories of his mother's harsh words echoed in Leo's mind. She wondered how he managed to approach Karen again after the disgrace he had endured 3 years earlier, an event that had brought shame upon his father's reputation. He made it clear to him that Karen should be seen as his competitor rather than an ally. As Leo kept quiet, she accused him of being weak. At last, Leo turned to his mother and clarified that he did not see Karen as someone he was competing against. He described the significant difference in their abilities, noting that Karen had already achieved 4-star status by the time she was 13, whereas he had only managed to attain 3 stars at 15. Leo firmly insisted that he did not see Karen as his competitor. Despite everything, the ambition that drove him gave him the determination to keep striving and progressing. His mother ended their talk by pointing out that he focused too much on the individual parts, like the rivalry, rather than understanding the whole situation. While riding the train, engaged Leo in conversation, noticing that he confessed to feeling anxious since it was his very first mission. Looked Leo in the eyes and posed a straightforward question, wanting to know if he was capable of taking another man's life. Leo paused, uncertainty flickering across his face. Offered him reassurance, expressing her confidence in his abilities, and reminding him that she understood better than anyone the challenges he had faced during his training. She reminded Leo that his skills had come from her training. Her words touched him, and in response, Leo respectfully referred to her as his master. With the train set to arrive in 20 minutes, made up her mind that, for the duration of their mission, she and her companion would refer to one another as master and student. She declared her intention to leap from the train, planning to move ahead quietly and survey the area without being detected. Expressed his concern about the risks involved in leaping from a train that was still in motion. Comforted him, explaining that her nephews would keep an eye on him from afar, and that he had nothing to worry about. Karen expressed her admiration for his boldness while leaped off the train. This unexpected turn of events left, and Leo stunned, their minds racing with questions about the peculiar behaviors within the family. When they reached the barony of, his father Baron met them. He remained seated because of his injuries and expressed his regret for not being able to stand and greet them properly. Responded with courtesy, assuring him there was no need for concern, and inquired gently about the nature of his wounds. When the boys entered the room and saw Baron confined to his bed, the Baron expressed his gratitude for their visit. He recalled having crossed paths with Karen and his father a decade earlier. She remarked on his impressive growth, suggesting it would surely fill his father with pride. Karen, feeling uneasy with the usual formal manners, requested that the Baron use plain language when speaking to him. Respecting this wish, the Baron agreed to refer to him as young Master Karen. The Baron demonstrated sharp perception, reasoning that must have achieved the rank of 4-star in martial arts already, as he was entrusted with. The Baron voiced his trust in the main estate's assessment of the boy's skills. At the same moment, he worried about risking the lives of 2 talented young men by assigning them to such a perilous task. Karen offered words of comfort to the Baron, expressing his awareness of the Baron's worries. However, he emphasized that failing their missions would bring disgrace to the Blue Wolves, a fate they refused to accept or even contemplate. He looked over at Leo, seeking reassurance. Although hesitant, Leo nodded and admitted that their success was certain. The Baron chuckled warmly and expressed his gratitude to everyone for placing their trust in him. Karen observed that the Baron appeared weary, so she informed everyone that it was time for them to depart. The Baron placed his trust in them regarding the task and informed them that he had arranged for a guide to assist them on their journey. The boy began his journey alongside the guide, making his way through the snow-covered mountains. As they traveled, Karen teased Leo, questioning whether exhaustion had already set in for him. Leo, choosing not to respond to the provocation, instead voiced his suspicions about the guide's intentions. He noted that there was still a possibility he could be working with the bandits. Karen offered a mocking congratulations to Leo, implying it was impressive that he could think at all. She then, in a composed manner, assured him that his suspicions were accurate and explained that the guide was very likely part of the group of bandits. Leo's surprise was evident as he wondered aloud about how the information had come to light. In response, Karen revealed that he had caught snippets of Baron's conversation while at the station. During a memory from the past, Assistant wondered about the method they would use to find the bandits' secret base. In response, explained that their only chance was to rely on an informant hidden among the bandits. Leo had questioned him about why he hadn't mentioned it before. Karen responded by noting that he had been anxious throughout the entire day. Karen took a moment to assess what had happened, realizing that had cleverly manipulated the traitor to work against their group. She clarified to Leo that, at the moment, their purpose was to serve as bait because abducting young nobles like themselves would result in a substantial ransom demand. Karen pointed out to Leo that the traitors' continued survival without facing any consequences served as clear evidence of their situation, showing just how desperate things had become. Acting as their guide brought the group straight into a trap that the bandit leader had carefully arranged. He received a bonus payment as the victims were young nobles. Among the bandits, one observed that the two young men seemed unlikely to comply without resistance. Karen and Leo prepared themselves, bracing for the upcoming battle. Karen, her voice trembling with fury, announced that she could never pardon those responsible for distributing drugs on her father's property. At the Baron's home, checked on his father's well-being, expressing his concern. The Baron comforted his son by confirming that he felt healthy. Handed a cup of water to his father, showing his care and concern. Visibly worried, turned to his father and wondered aloud whether the two young men would be safe. The father, his expression unreadable, pointed out that Blue Sea Castle's decision to send the boys with so little information showed just how much faith they had in the boys' skills. He went on to mention that Karen brought to mind Duke Hallow when he was younger, noting not only a similarity in looks but also in the way Karen carried himself, with quiet confidence and a composed, noble air. Inside the Baron's grand home, Baron assured his son of his trust, firmly stating that placing hope in the two young men was justified. High in the snow-covered mountains, Karen fought with extraordinary skill, swiftly cutting down bandits and severing their heads with an almost otherworldly precision. Leo stood frozen, his eyes wide with terror as he silently witnessed the unfolding events. He considered privately that Karen possessed a monstrous nature. The deputy leader of the bandits, his voice tinged with worry, warned the leader that their opponents were far from ordinary and suggested that they retreat to alert the main group. The bandit leader's face twisted with fury. The person would not allow themselves to lose to someone so inexperienced. A crimson glow surrounded her as she charged at Karen. Karen greeted him with a calm demeanor, remarking that his battle shout was irritating. With one powerful strike, he was cleaved cleanly into two pieces. Leo stood in shock as Karen remarked with ease that he had unintentionally employed a strong technique. Karen voiced her frustration about the leader ruining his own clothes with stains. One of the few bandits left alive felt a surge of fear as strength, and the intimidating presence of his sword nearly overpowered him. He gave up right away. Karen's lips curled into a sly smile as she questioned about the presence of a rope, then instructed him to fetch it for her. Leo was shocked when Karen instructed to bind both him and Leo together. They also handed him their swords, preparing him for what lay ahead. Leo wondered aloud about the reason behind their elaborate plan, prompting Karen to clarify that a believable capture was necessary in order to successfully lure out the bandits and discover their hideout. It seemed unreasonable that a lone, unarmed individual could overpower and capture two members of the nobility. While they continued down the path, Karen started questioning their captive. Visibly shaken, admitted that they had abandoned their posts and fled from the kingdom of, which lay in the southern region torn by war. Karen inquired about the size of their group within the fortress. Explained that their group numbered 130 people, counting 2 mages along with the knights assigned to protect them. At that instant, understood just how serious his error had been. It became clear that those he had taken prisoner were no mere nobles. They were the future successors of the powerful family. Karen thought's explanation, that their leader had guaranteed them effortless wealth, didn't make sense. He questioned in his mind what would draw someone as distinguished as mages to associate with an ordinary infantry captain, and what reasons could lead them to select the impoverished barony of as the site for their thefts. Karen came to the realization that the story lacked any logical coherence. They realized that witnessing the truth firsthand was something they needed to do. When they arrived at the bandits' secret hideout, the other guards looked on in shock, puzzled by his decision to bring captives along. At the entrance to the bandits' hideout, the guards eyed suspiciously, demanding an explanation for his solitary return and the weapons he carried. Asserted that he had seized the weapons from the young masters as spoils of victory, while explaining that the rest of his group was pursuing those who had managed to flee. Despite their taunts, the guards eventually swung the gate open for him. Once inside, Karen observed that the deserters appeared to be rather careless, making this note to himself. Throughout the journey, an unusual force lingered around him, leaving him feeling uneasy. At that moment, his sword, guillotine, started to respond to the presence. He quickly realized what was making him uncomfortable: the bodies of birds suspended as offerings. On the floor, there was an enormous dark magic circle. Wasted no time instructing to release him from his bonds and return his sword. He then surprised Leo by instructing him to his sword, cautioning him that it would soon become necessary. As the magic circle burst to life, skeletal warriors clad in armor emerged from the earth. The sudden arrival of the bandit leader sent into a state of panic. He greeted the captives with a sarcastic welcome as they arrived at his fortress in the mountains. Karen scanned the area, hoping to spot the black mage, but he was nowhere in sight. She reasoned that he must be concealing himself somewhere nearby. Without hesitation, he seized, pressing a blade against his throat and warning the bandits that he would end his life should they dare to make a move. Leo felt a surge of disbelief, viewing the act as a grave violation of the noble code he held dear. The bandit leader taunted Karen, questioning whether nobles truly held honor as their highest ideal. Karen fired back with a questioning look, silently challenging the idea that he lacked the right to act as he wished. The leader observed Karen with intrigue, but ultimately announced that the hostage held no value. Proved to be of no help at all, which allowed Karen to treat him however he wanted. The leader shoved in his direction. When Leo understood they had no way out, he turned to, wanting to know what they should do next. Karen responded with certainty, explaining that their strategy was straightforward. Their only task was to take out the leader. The leader's eyes caught the faint blue glow of mana surrounding, and a look of concern appeared on their face. Karen informed Leo of his plan to confront the leader himself, instructing Leo to handle the skeletons. Before Leo had a chance to understand what was happening, Karen rushed forward with determination, aiming directly at the leader. Leo found himself abandoned, standing alone as the army of skeletons rose completely to confront him. A wave of panic washed over Leo when skeletal soldiers closed in on all sides, leaving him uncertain about handling such overwhelming odds alone. The skeletons moved forward, preparing to launch their assault against him. Karen advanced swiftly toward the leader, channeling her strength into a formidable attack as she invoked the third technique of the sea wolf sword. Channeled the power of his sword and aimed it at the leader. Karen's attack landed squarely on the leader, slicing off his hand and causing him to collapse in agony. Karen was referred to as a troublesome brat. Taunted the leader, remarking that if he really intended to strike, he should have acted earlier. The leader questioned the involvement of Blue Sea Castle in their business, but clarified that this barony bordered his father's territory. He explained that he had no plans to end the man's life, but instead would escort him to the castle. At the same time, Leo faced off against the skeletons, handling them with unexpected skill. From afar, Karen observed him closely, silently urging him to persevere with unwavering strength, just as the sea wolf sword technique had taught them both. Karen made her way back to Michael, who was injured and struggling. She repeated her request for his name, wanting to make certain she had heard it correctly. Once he responded, Karen drove her knife into his leg without hesitation, using the pain to overpower him and make him yield. Wearing a cold smile, he instructed him to tell his soldiers to lay down their arms. The leader carried out the action, struggling through the pain. Michael, now beaten, mourned his loss to the two young challengers. Despite his defeat, he issued a warning to Karen, hinting at the consequences that would follow once they made their appearance. Even a member of the family would find it impossible to manage them. Karen figured out that the leader was relying on the black mages for success. Karen ridiculed the leader's optimism, silently questioning whether he truly believed the family would trust only 2 of their children to go unaccompanied. He observed that the magic circle was no longer visible and clarified that having a guardian was to be expected. A thunderous explosion echoed from afar just then. Karen observed that their delay with the leader had cost them the chance to seize the black mage while he was still alive. Made an abrupt entrance, clutching the black mage's decapitated head in her grasp. Leo turned away in revulsion at what he saw. Announced that the mission had failed, since they had allowed their most vital lead, the living mage, to escape. Karen boldly questioned his aunt, wanting to know whether his tactics managed to impress her. In response, struck the fallen leader repeatedly until he passed out from the blows. Afterwards, she reprimanded Karen for being careless and charging into hostile territory without a plan, remarking that his impulsiveness reminded her of her older brother. She acknowledged to herself that his boldness, so typical of the family, deserved some extra credit. Points would be subtracted if anyone decided to take a hostage. She questioned him about his reasons. Karen revealed his intention to take advantage of their vulnerability, believing they would be caught off guard by a noble resorting to hostage-taking. Chuckled at his logic, thinking he was an unusually wild boy unlike anyone she'd encountered before, while the captured leader silently considered the whole group to be a bunch of lunatics. Informed everyone that it was time to head back to Baron Castle, anticipating that many inquiries awaited them there. They began to depart from the villagers, once held captive in cages, were set free, and heartfelt reunions between family members unfolded as they embraced each other. Once the fighting ended, families joyfully embraced the loved ones who had finally regained their freedom. Karen observed the bandit, lingering off to the side with guilt written across his face. She taunted him, questioning whether remorse was finally starting to trouble him. Advised that the timing was not right, warning him that he might end up imprisoned in the barony's dungeon just like the rest of his team. She explained that, instead of being locked up there, he and his captain would be transferred to Blue Sea Castle. Leo wondered aloud about the safety of leaving, without restraints. Karen pointed out that his assistance was required to transport their injured captain. He cautioned Leo to remain vigilant at all times. Just then, a villager who had just been saved stepped forward. The villager began to plead on's behalf, expressing concern about whether might also face punishment. The villager revealed that had shown genuine concern for the prisoners, quietly delivering medicine to those who were ill and sharing his own meals with anyone who was starving. He begged them desperately, hoping they would spare him. Glanced over at Karen, silently seeking his thoughts on the matter. After noticing the stunned expression on his face, Karen weighed the situation and concluded that they might go easier on since he had helped them find the hideout. A surge of gratitude swept through, compelling him to pledge unwavering allegiance to Karen for the rest of his life. Leo suddenly stepped into the situation, getting Karen's attention and urging her to look at something he considered significant. Leo guided the other person toward a nearby barrel. Inside was an enormous, luminous stone radiating magical energy. As the villagers rejoiced, they mocked the captured bandits with jeers and taunts. Leo felt confident that, when they came back, the young master would have a grand meal waiting for them. Pondered quietly, piecing together the truth behind the unusual number of bandits roaming the impoverished, isolated region. He came to understand that their presence was linked to a hidden magic stone mine, one so secret that even the Baron's own family was unaware of its existence. Leo caught sight of the mischievous glint in his cousin's eyes, and wondered what kind of plan he might be devising this time. Baron appeared alongside his father, both stepping forward to welcome those who had come to their aid. Gave instructions for the captives to be locked away in the dungeon. He requested that surrender the bandit leader, but insisted she was merely a guardian and pointed him toward her students, Karen and Leo. Extended an invitation to the group for a simple meal, yet Karen refused, explaining that they needed to depart for Blue Sea Castle without delay. At that moment, mentioned the topic of the payment required for the mission. He acknowledged that his barony did not have enough resources to cover the entire amount and asked for more time to make the payment. Karen's face shifted into a sly grin as he purposefully started making demeaning remarks about the barony. The place was portrayed as one of the most isolated spots imaginable. Felt a surge of irritation at the situation. At that moment, Karen revealed that the bandits had a completely different objective. Presented the enchanted stone, too, leaving him wide-eyed with surprise as he confessed his complete ignorance about the existence of a mine on his property. Holding every advantage, Karen revealed that he also intended to put forward an offer of his own. Explained his plan to Baron, suggesting that Blue Sea Castle and the barony should work together to develop the magic stone mine. The agreement required the castle to supply both the starting funds and the necessary guards. Felt a jolt of surprise inside, unsure if the boy understood just how serious his words were. However, soon recognized that simply having the influential family associated with his barony would be a tremendous advantage. Realized that had carefully planned every detail, and he was amazed by how boldly a young child could handle such serious negotiations. Karen went on to explain that this plan might make it possible to set up a knight's garrison within the barony, offering a solution to the region's defense issues while also promoting economic development. Inquired about the percentage of shares the other person was considering. Karen skillfully avoided the question, insisting that someone his age shouldn't be concerned with the complexities of the project, and suggesting that should instead talk it over with his father. Decided he would talk to his father about the matter, and promised to reach out to them in the near future. After some time had passed, Karen posed a question to Lady. Anticipated trouble at the bandits, lair because of her previous encounter with the woman dressed in black who served as a maid. The truth came to light that he was far from an ordinary mage. His real identity was Tad La, a mage of the Sixth Circle and a notorious criminal sought by the Empire with a second-degree warrant. Chastised the boys, pointing out how they had let themselves get distracted by the minor threat of the bandits and their catch of small fish, all while failing to focus on the real objective. Carried on with her lesson, emphasizing that real power develops when one confronts formidable adversaries. She pointed out that if they had managed to overcome the Black Mage on their own, they wouldn't have ended up spending their time dealing with someone as insignificant as Rabble. Because of this, she believed the mission had not succeeded, and Karen received her decision with quiet acceptance. Afterward, she faced Leo, who had the impression that he had been overlooked. She surprised him with praise, noting that his performance had far exceeded her expectations, particularly considering it was his first encounter with the undead. She motivated him to believe in his own abilities and carry himself with greater confidence. Hullo made his way back from the capital, arriving once more at Blue Sea Castle. His attendants welcomed him, letting him know that the knight had come back from the west, and also that Karen, Leo, and were returning from their assignment. Without warning, a courier appeared, bringing a critical announcement from the Imperial Palace. After opening the letter, the individual stared in disbelief at what was written inside. The Emperor had given no indication of such matters prior to his departure from the capital. The Emperor himself extended a personal invitation to his grandson, summoning him to the capital. Aboard the train heading back, transported his prisoner, Captain Michael, in his grasp. Michael attempted to convince that they should run away together, believing he had spotted a weakness in the security they could exploit. Reacted with anger, hitting the other person and turning down his request. She reminded him that he had once labeled him as worthless and easily replaced. When the group arrived back at Blue Sea Castle, their family welcomed them warmly. Bali couldn't help but make a sarcastic observation about the continuing disorder in Karen's environment. In response, Karen snapped back at him with a sharp threat. Bali greeted his son with genuine warmth as engaged in conversation with him, eventually deducing that her brother Halo was probably the one who had called him there, due to the chaos Karen had stirred up within the barony of. At the same time, Bali expressed his pride in Leo's recent success, mentioning that word of Leo's accomplishment had already reached him before Leo arrived. Leo experienced a sense of joy, convinced that both his father and grandfather would take pride in his accomplishments. At that moment, Karen mentioned feeling exhausted and decided to head upstairs to rest. The mood shifted to one of gravity when questioned Bali about his awareness of the strange political events unfolding within the empire. Bali clarified that all the major powers, with the exception of their own family, were coming together quickly, forming an alliance led by the Salmon Duchy and explained that their father intended to visit multiple families in the capital to evaluate the circumstances. However, he decided to call off all his appointments after his discussions with the emperor ended without a favorable outcome. Bali went on to clarify that the two families in question had played a key role in removing the former emperor and placing the present ruler on the throne. Now, these families held power over the entire system. Felt sorrow over her brother's choice to step away from the heart of power for the sake of the empire's future, especially since his sacrifice was now being repaid with such poor treatment. The pair came to the realization that the days of tranquility were almost over, signaling that their family needed to take action. Recognized an advantage in their predicament, noting that Karen's actions could actually benefit them. She realized that now they possessed a legitimate excuse to dispatch their forces into territories controlled by other families, thereby increasing their power. She thought of Karen as an intriguing boy, noting how he had helped the family right when they needed it most. Bali mentioned to his aunt that she often complimented him more than he deserved, but she insisted that her words were not truly meant as praise. Later, Sir approached the group and offered his praise for their success in capturing the runaway bandits. He informed them that he planned to start questioning the bandit leader had brought in, determined to uncover all the details the prisoner might know. He inquired into who truly was. Karen clarified that, at the moment, the man was regarded as a bandit as well. However, because he had served as an informant, she believed he deserved lenient treatment and should be set free. She intended to publicly declare her decision to make him her own servant, a proposal to which gave his consent. As the boys moved to take a break, intervened, pointing out that they still had unfinished tasks ahead. Karen wondered aloud about the time of his arrival, to which responded that he had just gotten there recently and reminded her that they needed to complete a report. Karen wondered aloud whether separate reports were necessary, but permitted them to collaborate and submit a joint report. Karen wasted no time attempting to shift the responsibility onto Leo, insisting that he was the one who had handled all of the difficult tasks. He decided to try convincing them, reminding them that Uncle Tiles was going to see the report. Leo realized this was his opportunity to gain recognition by highlighting his accomplishments in the report, an idea that quickly won him over. Once they arrived back, Sir gave the command for the prisoners to be taken away and secured in their cells. Tossed the severed head of the notorious criminal toward him, indicating through her actions that the boy's statements would serve as enough evidence. Karen offered Leo her best wishes for success on his report, while Leo revealed his plans to head to the Mana training room and try out the fourth form he had just mastered. Was left in awe, struck by the unwavering determination he witnessed. At the same time, Hello called the family together for an urgent meeting. He revealed that the meeting had been called because of intelligence gathered while dealing with the demons that had shown up near the castle lately. He instructed to call for the Knight Commander, appeared in response to the summons, and handed over a fragment of demon skin. Hello explained to the group that this particular artifact had been gathered from the Western Celestial Dome area. Hallow observed that the dark mana present within the skin was unusual. In that moment, it became clear to them, with startling realization, that the item was once possessed by the deposed emperor. Suggested two options, one being that only his will remained still present in the world. Some believed that the former emperor might have survived. A greeting was offered as someone pieced together that the issue at hand was linked to the current happenings within the empire. Soon after, another update came to light. Word of what had occurred in the barony had already reached the emperor. Karen had received a personal invitation to visit the capital. He revealed his intention to have Leo and the knights join Karen on her journey. He emphasized his intention to seek Karen's thoughts before making any decisions, assuring that he would not pressure the boy to attend since he was still young. Hello's main concern was figuring out what thoughts were running through Karen's mind. After striking an agreement with Baron, he instructed to fetch him. Entered the training room and saw Karen quietly meditating. Karen wondered aloud about his arrival time, prompting him to explain that he had only just gotten there. Explained that, apart from close relatives, only Sir had permission to come in. However, he realized that had never actually set foot in the training room before, suggesting that something important must have happened. Let him know that he had been called to attend the family council, where they would be talking about an upcoming journey to the capital. Explained that the family leader had called Lord Cairn to attend the council meeting, assuring him that the specifics would be explained in person. When Cairn entered the council chamber, Hullo mentioned that he had only recently heard about the successful completion of Cairn's first mission, and Cairn acknowledged this news. Hullo approached and wasted no time in asking why he had chosen to act on his own. He exceeded his limits by taking it upon himself to negotiate with the House of. He questioned whether the young man realized that his prideful actions could deeply offend those around him. Karen soon understood that this situation was more of an interrogation than a compliment. Despite the accusation, he refuted it by clarifying that he had merely presented one suggestion to the young baron, who had chosen to accept it entirely of his own accord. Inside the council hall, stood before his grandfather, justifying his behavior. He explained that he believed something outweighed the importance of noble etiquette, responding to Hullo's inquiry about what could possibly surpass the value of courtesy. Karen responded by saying that the family's reputation was at stake. The greeting left a strong impression on everyone present. He reflected on Karen's actions, recognizing that she could have claimed all the praise from the successful deal and focused on her own achievements. Instead, she chose to prioritize her family's well-being, which he considered an admirable and impressive choice. After considering the situation, revealed his choice. He recognized that the agreement Karen presented would bring significant advantages to their family, so he assigned his son Bali the responsibility of managing the official discussions. Bali consented to set out for the barony at sunrise the following morning, prompting Hullo to remark that a father gaining honor because of his son's achievements was something to be proud of. After greeting her, the conversation shifted to the emperor's letter. Karen was officially that the emperor had called for him, as word of his deeds had reached the capital. Realized from his explanation that the emperor's letter had reached Blue Sea Castle before Hullo came back. This made question inwardly whether the emperor's network of spies was truly that powerful. Karen mulled over the situation and realized that the powerful nobles manipulating the figurehead emperor were truly responsible for this rapid summons, rather than the emperor alone. Karen was given the chance to stay behind instead of going. Hullo reflected on Karen, certain that he had already understood the significance of traveling to the capital at that moment. Hullo considered the possible consequences that might come from either agreeing or turning down the offer. Bali realized that Halo should have kept the decision away from, but before Bali could say more, cut in. Insisted that, because the emperor had called for him personally, he was obligated to answer that summons. He also mentioned that this would give him a chance to reunite with his grandfather on his mother's side. Karen wanted to know if he planned to go by himself, and Hullo assured her that Leo would be joining him. Han's team was also assigned to serve as guards. Karen wondered aloud why they needed extra guards when his grandfather was already there. In response, Hullo playfully called out that the guards weren't there for his protection, but rather to keep an eye on any mischief he might get into. Hullo informed everyone that they would be leaving in 3 days. Later on, Bali wrapped up his discussions with Baron. The families decided that they would receive 80% of the mine's shares, leaving the remaining 20% to the family. Bali found himself confused by another stipulation that seemed difficult to grasp. This condition required that 5% of share, amounting to a quarter of their portion, be given straight to Karen and Leo. They thought the fee was too high for just a simple commission. He inquired about the motivation behind this choice from, who was known for his impressive accomplishments at the Imperial Academy. Openly stated that he viewed this condition as a form of investment. The aim was to earn the trust of the two young wolves destined to rule Blue Sea Castle in the future. Bali perceived confidence in understanding the children's abilities as arrogance and found his attitude highly disrespectful. Bali found themselves in a heated argument, during which Bali acknowledged boldness with a hint of admiration. At last, the boys received the call, and with relief, they nodded in appreciation as they took up the opportunity presented to them. Conveyed how much this partnership meant to his family's reputation and pride. As the group prepared to depart, Leo turned to Karen with a question on his mind. Once the agreement with the barony of was finalized, Leo turned to Karen with a question about splitting their 5% share. Karen responded without hesitation, explaining that she would be taking 9/10, leaving Leo with just 1/10. Leo could hardly believe what he was hearing, but when Karen stepped forward with a menacing warning, fear overwhelmed him, and he quickly consented without hesitation. Bali stood beside his aide, both observing the unfolding scene. The aide remarked on how the two boys, once known for their intense childhood quarrels, were now interacting differently. They could no longer be apart. When Leo reached the capital, a mix of excitement and anxiety filled him. He realized that everything he knew about the city came from stories he had overheard, leaving him uncertain about how he should behave. Karen attempted to calm Leo, yet he insisted that his eagerness was warranted since he was on the verge of meeting the Emperor. He started to imagine himself attending lively social gatherings in the city, hoping to encounter the elegant women of. Having caught snippets of their discussion, approached the group. She remarked on, describing it as a fascinating place renowned for its powerful warriors, and suggested that visiting there would offer them a valuable experience. She requested wine glasses, so she could offer a toast in celebration of their successful first mission. With a hint of sarcasm, Karen remarked on the absence of wine glasses in a teenage boy's room before she decided to pour the wine into ordinary water cups instead. Wondered aloud whether Leo had ever experienced the taste of wine. He confessed that Karen had supplied him with some earlier. Handed a glass to Leo, and he took it from her. Lifted her glass in admiration of how much they had accomplished, while Karen expressed gratitude to her for being his mentor. She declared that her vow to shield them for 3 years had come to an end, and with a note of sadness, she admitted she would miss witnessing whatever chaos they might cause in the city. Leo felt a wave of sadness upon learning that she would soon be departing for the North Sea, and he wondered aloud if this meant their paths would never cross again. Reacted with a dismissive laugh, clearly unimpressed by how easily his feelings were hurt. He was then cautioned against attending parties with Karen. Karen's striking looks, remarkable abilities, and persuasive way with words were certain to draw everyone's focus to her. Leo became anxious, pleading with Karen not to ruin his opportunity for marriage. In response, Karen insulted his intelligence, calling him a fool. Karen instructed Leo to remain silent and urged him to keep drinking. Some time afterward, events unfolded at Blue Sea Castle. Bali let Hullo know that the negotiations with had ended successfully. Hullo could hardly believe it when they willingly agreed to give a portion of their share to Karen and Leo. Bali clarified that the young baron's perspective carried significant weight, since he had characterized the agreement as an investment aimed at securing future benefits. Hullo admired the cleverness of the young barons and believed they had secured a trustworthy supporter. Halo placed the responsibility for every issue concerning the barony in Bali's hands. Bali suspected his father had called him for more than just a simple reason, since compliments were rarely given in their household. Hallo confirmed his suspicions by explaining that the emperor rarely called for Karen, making this summons very out of the ordinary. Until now, he had never called upon anyone from the family but shared something unsettling. In his recent private audience with the emperor, he noticed that fear of him lingered in the Emperor's eyes. Hello continued speaking with Bali, sharing his suspicion that the Emperor's wariness suggested someone else was influencing Karen's invitation. Bali acknowledged that the issue appeared to be driven by political motives and questioned internally why Hullo had not declined the Emperor's demand, given the intricate political climate. Hullo clarified that he had not turned down the offer. He wanted to discover just how far Karen's abilities could go. He clarified that Karen was selected by the founding ancestor's legendary sword, guillotine. This selection marked him as the heart of the family, ensuring he would unavoidably confront many threats and obstacles from outside sources. Viewed this invitation as a challenge meant to measure his son's strength. Since Karen was expected to be responsible for the family's future, he needed to prove he could handle difficult situations. Turning to his son, Bali inquired whether he felt anxious about what was ahead. Bali felt a surge of emotion, but quickly regained his self-control. He boldly stated his unwavering faith in his son. Did not expect the answer she received, and it caught her off guard. A smile spread across their face as they found the response delightful. The following morning, made arrangements to head back to the North Sea. Wondered aloud whether she planned to bid farewell to the boys. She explained that she didn't think it was needed, since she had already enjoyed drinking his stolen wine with everyone the night before. Since the boys were occupied with getting ready for their trip, leaving without drawing attention seemed like the best choice. As they parted ways, assured her that there would be more wine waiting when she returned. Just before leaving, caught Karen's eye through the window, their gaze meeting in a quiet moment of understanding. She left, offering him a parting goodbye and the promise of seeing each other again. Karen considered the North Sea to be a place where he truly belonged. As he waited, he considered searching for something to eat and perhaps a little wine to pass the time. He was surprised by how fast decided to go. The moment walked out, Karen suspected that his uncles would soon begin putting their plans into action. Almost as though destiny had heard his musings, his uncle Tiles emerged unexpectedly at his back. The sudden event caught him off guard. At the bustling train station, several servants themselves by transporting the luggage that belonged to the group of young men. Leo found himself curious about why everyone seemed so excited. Clarified that their behavior was expected, given that they would soon be meeting the Emperor on behalf of their family. Karen expressed her irritation over having to be accompanied by Han's squad. Clarified that their mission was to keep everyone safe, though Hans interrupted with a dismissive remark, insisting that their true role was to prevent any mischief from happening. Before departing, Tiles went to see Karen in his room, and after exchanging greetings, they spent a few moments together. Tiles acknowledged that news of the journey to the capital had reached him, and he mentioned that he had a single favor to ask. Karen wondered aloud about Tiles, hoping he would behave differently in the capital than he did at Blue Sea Castle. Karen nodded in agreement, yet he internally recognized that his uncle was confessing to having observed him the entire time. Tiles cautioned him that dangers lurked throughout the capital, with adversaries eager to seize any opportunity to topple their family. He intended to deal out harsh punishment himself if Karen provided even the slightest excuse. The moment the Tiles were gone, everything changed. Karen's face shifted, betraying a mix of annoyance and determination. He let out a short, dismissive laugh at his uncle's attempt to intimidate him, clearly recognizing that the man was using his position as the eldest son to assert control. Internally, Karen made a silent promise to himself that he would find a way to outsmart his proud uncle and reverse the situation. At the train station, everything was ready for the journey to begin. Karen and Hans were caught up in a heated argument. Who had once lived as a bandit, walked up to the group and expressed his gratitude for being offered a new beginning. Karen responded with a calm demeanor, then made a harsh joke about only bringing him to the capital so he could abandon him in its unforgiving prison, warning him not to let his guard down. Pleaded desperately with, asking her not to leave him behind, but told him that his actions would determine her decision. Before the boys left, offered them a final word of guidance, urging them to stay out of trouble and make sure they came back unharmed. Just as the train prepared to leave the station, Bali hurried onto the platform, eager to catch a final glimpse of his son before he departed. He revealed that his reason for coming was to catch another glimpse of him before his departure. He was informed that his grandfather on his mother's side eagerly anticipated seeing him as well. Bali embraced his son tightly, expressing his hope that he would come back unharmed. Karen found it amusing that efforts were being made to avoid any problems. Once the train had departed, Tiles remained in his office. He learned that his second son's wife, Raphael's spouse, was secretly making plans in the capital. He chose to wait and see rather than do anything right away. While traveling on the train, Karen turned to Hans and wanted to know how long their trip would take. He explained that the journey lasted around 6 hours as it passed through S's autonomous region. They discussed a unique city known for its system where ordinary citizens choose their own mayor, and where trade and manufacturing thrive more than farming. In that place, social standing depended entirely on wealth. Hans revealed that the family's power in the empire stemmed from their immense wealth, but he also noted that other regional lords kept a watchful eye on their activities. Cairn shared his realization that certain residents of the province occasionally escaped the oppressive rule of dishonest lords by seeking refuge in self-governing areas. Hans mentioned that the area maintained a positive relationship with Blue Sea Castle and frequently relied on its knights for important responsibilities. The boys shared their excitement about sneaking into the city at a later time. Karen sensed a peculiar sensation when his sword responded to a mysterious force nearby. Karen abruptly noticed an unusual sensation coming from his sword, understanding that this was a sign the weapon had detected approaching danger. At first, he suspected that either Raphael, his uncles, might have secretly placed an agent among the escorts with the intention of harming him. He promptly set aside the thought, understanding that they would never be reckless enough to attempt something like that. Leo observed unusual behavior and called out to him, concerned. Meanwhile, determined that the danger was likely originating from outside. Without delay, instructed Hans to get in touch with the autonomous territory of right away. Hans found himself puzzled by the abrupt command, but before he could ask why, Karen shouted urgently that there was no time for explanations. She insisted he quickly alert the other vehicles so they could get ready for an attack that could happen at any moment. Hans, caught off guard, quickly followed the orders and passed the warning along to every escort. The escorts confirmed they understood and got ready to defend against the coming attack. At the same time, Karen pondered the possibility of an outside danger, questioning how it would be possible for someone to launch an attack on a train in motion. A short distance from the railway, several individuals concealed behind masks themselves to carry out their scheme. The group's leader declared that the moment they had all been waiting for had finally arrived. He and his group sprang into action, swiftly positioning barrels packed with explosives and secured with fuses along the tracks just as the train drew near. After completing their preparations, a member of the group ignited the fuse as the leader cautioned the others to brace themselves for the impending blast. The train struck the barrels, causing a huge explosion that tore the train off the tracks and left it in ruins. At the same time, events were unfolding within the self-governed region of. The mayor oversaw a chaotic meeting filled with shouting. Several participants hurled accusations of money laundering at others, claiming that the National Tax Service was actively investigating them. In response, those being blamed quickly turned the allegations around, insisting that their accusers were actually the ones at fault. The disagreement grew more intense, leading one individual to insist that the mayor take action against his rivals, labeling them as criminals. The mayor regretted his decision to go to the meeting. He reflected inwardly, believing that stepping down after his time as finance minister would have been wiser. Regret filled her as she saw the city transformed into a scene of utter chaos. There was an ongoing conflict between the guilds of nobles and those of commoners. An aide burst into the meeting, carrying an urgent message meant for the mayor. After sending away the quarrelsome guests, the person permitted him to come closer. One of the few people left in the room wondered aloud if the announcement concerned the ongoing tax investigation. The mayor, however, remained composed as he lit a cigarette and explained that such a trivial inquiry was now completely irrelevant. The question arose regarding whether the investigation had been called off. He refused, bluntly dismissing the investigation and insisting that it could be ignored completely. He went on to share startling information. Just 5 minutes earlier, a train traveling from the estate toward the capital had been destroyed in an explosion, and both of the Grand Duke's grandsons had been passengers on that train. The man froze in shock. The mayor, with a composed demeanor, clarified that the incident signified their inevitable doom. At the crash site, Karen slowly stood up amid the debris. Hans glanced at him with concern, questioning whether Karen had been hurt in the accident. Karen assured him that he had only suffered a few small scrapes. Hans quickly asked for an update on the situation. The reply informed him that among the 11 individuals present, Dell had suffered a severe injury, while 2 others had only minor wounds. Shortly after, Squad sent word that 2 of their members had been killed. Observing this, Karen realized the gravity of the situation, as it was unusual for someone as low in rank as to deliver such news. Karen turned to Hans and inquired where they were at that moment. Hans informed them that they were approximately 10 kilometers away from the autonomous region known as. He further clarified that contact with the territory had been made prior to the 2 young men regaining consciousness. Help was expected to arrive soon. Hans encouraged Karen and Leo to escape and put as much distance between themselves and danger as they could. He promised his team he would hold off the enemy to give them a chance to escape. Meanwhile, Karen's sword, the guillotine, began to stir once more. He suddenly became aware that they were not by themselves. A hidden group was lying in wait, ready to attack. Despite Hans's urge to escape, Karen shook her head, expressing regret and explaining that running away simply wasn't an option. Hans wanted to know the reason, so Karen told him that the attackers had ruined the Emperor's valuable railway, a deed that amounted to outright rebellion. He questioned how long they could escape from individuals who possessed so much boldness. He looked toward Leo, questioning whether he was able to continue battling, and Leo responded with eager affirmation. Observing this, Karen determined that they had no choice but to pursue the final remaining option. One of the masked assailants reeled from an unexpected strike, just as Karen stepped up behind him, her expression radiating self-assurance. Karen insisted that everyone needed to be eliminated and launched the assault. Observing the situation, the leader of the attackers realized there were more defenders present than he had anticipated. Hans instructed the second squad to disembark from their vehicles and assemble into a defensive formation, ensuring the safety of the young masters. Hans explained to Karen that all of their opponents were ranked at least 3 stars. Karen observed the figure at the front and sensed a powerful presence, one that reminded her of a 6-star fighter's commanding energy. The leader addressed Karen directly, commanding him to put down his weapon and give himself up. Karen realized that the leader's voice had been changed by magic. The leader then promised that, if Karen without resistance, the knights and servants would be allowed to live peacefully. Based on the offer, Karen concluded that the attacker intended to take Hans alive, and she explained her reasoning to him. He questioned whether the other man grasped the significance of the situation. Hans caught on to Karen's intentions and pleaded with him to reconsider. Karen raised her voice, confused about why she was being stopped, and insisted that their inability to kill him must mean he held the power to end them instead. Leo let out a weary sigh in response to his cousin's impulsive actions, as Hans took command and instructed every squad to move forward and join the fight. Their duty was to ensure the safety of the 2 young masters. An intense clash erupted between the opposing forces. The knights closed ranks, creating a protective ring around the 2 youths while the pair battled their assailants with determination. The conflict between the knights and the masked men grew fiercer as their struggle became even more heated. Karen confronted the masked men, weaving swiftly among them as she launched her assault on each in turn. Karen noticed the attackers' reluctance to move closer and sarcastically questioned their courage, then volunteered to approach them instead. Upon hearing this, the leader instructed his followers to retreat, announcing his intention to confront Karen on his own. Karen remarked to herself that the boss had at last made an appearance. Hands moved in front of him, insisting that he should retreat since the adversary posed too great a threat. The leader ridiculed Hands, sarcastically referring to him as a sea knight who was charging straight toward his own demise. Hands, filled with defiance, declared through his actions that the outcome of their clash would reveal the true victor. With a fierce battle cry, he rushed toward his opponent, ready to fight. The battle commenced as Hands confronted the leader of the masked attackers. The leader unleashed a powerful assault, yet Hands, struggling, succeeded in deflecting the blow. He was amazed that he could fend off such a strong attack. By carefully observing the leader's combat techniques, Hands began to suspect the man's true identity. He questioned inwardly if this could be the renowned 6-star knight hailing from the Sultanate of. Hands found himself puzzled over the presence of a Sultanate knight within the empire's borders, given that the two nations currently upheld a non-aggression agreement. He found himself questioning his reasons for focusing on the family, since there had never been any notable conflict between the duchy and the Sultanate. Even though Hands felt uncertain, he resolved to uncover the truth on his own. His confidence grew as the momentum of the fight shifted toward his side, especially since the two young masters were holding their ground impressively. However, as Hands became distracted, noticed his chance and struck Hands forcefully. Ridiculed Hands for losing concentration, highlighting that Hands's arrangement of knights had already fallen apart. Hands, his anger flaring as he tried to summon his strength, found himself struck once more by, who insisted that fighting back was pointless and urged Hands to give up. Scanned his surroundings, realizing that his knights had already fallen and his carefully arranged formation had collapsed. Hands extended an opportunity for surrender to, and his soldiers, promising their safety and questioning why they would choose to lose their lives far from home. Declined the request, and firmly stated his intention to focus solely on completing his assigned task. Without warning, he released his strength with such force that the energy within him surged back uncontrollably. Hands came to understand that showed no fear of dying, and that this bold action could put both young masters in jeopardy. Hands realized that the only option left was to mirror his rival's wild determination, so he summoned all his strength to face him head-on. At that pivotal instant, Karen spoke up, making it clear that he felt let down by Hands. Karen made an unexpected entrance, making it clear to Hands that his main goal was to stop him from stirring up any problems. He made a sarcastic remark, questioning whether his opponent was giving up so soon. Faced Karen, who confidently acknowledged his name and announced himself as Karen. With remarkable speed, charged toward and brought him down instantly with one lethal strike. While lay dying, he used his final breaths to accuse Karen of being a monster. Unfazed, Karen accepted the label with a calm expression, treating it as if it were praise. He suddenly became aware that his sword, guillotine, had started trembling once more. Karen understood that the threat still lingered, and she confronted the weakened, suspecting he had one final scheme left. Expressed that he harbored no remorse for Karen, delivering a mysterious apology to him while a powerful aura started to radiate from his form. Karen stared in disbelief, her surprise evident, while Hands urgently commanded the knights, insisting they shield Lord Leo from harm. In the midst of the chaotic fight, someone stood motionless, overwhelmed by shock. Hands acted instantly, placing himself between Karen and the impending blast to protect him from harm. Karen shouted in confusion, demanding to know what was going on, while Hands explained that had activated a self-destruct spell. When the explosion erupted, Hands felt a deep sense of guilt and turned to Karen, believing that his own lack of skill had caused the disaster. As Hands lay close to death, desperation filled his eyes as he begged Karen to spare him. A tremendous blast erupted, destroying everything nearby. Amidst the turmoil, Karen became aware of an enigmatic presence chastising the reckless person responsible for disturbing its slumber. The mysterious voice revealed that it had not tasted the blood of knights in quite some time, and feeling obligated, decided to assist. It instructed Karen to squeeze his eyes shut, warning him that otherwise his eyeballs might burst. Once the smoke had dissipated, Karen discovered Hands lying unconscious on the ground and attempted to rouse him. Hands began his morning filled with frustration. Karen received a stern reprimand for showing little concern after someone had risked their own safety to shield him. In response, Karen remained unfazed and questioned why anyone would expect gratitude for a rescue he never requested. Before they could continue, a voice echoed from Karen's sword, taunting them and claiming credit for Karen's survival, insisting that without its intervention, she would not have made it. He realized he ought to have expressed his gratitude toward it. Karen's eyes widened in disbelief as he discovered that his sword had begun to speak to him. He surveyed the vast ruins left by the blast, confusion filling his mind as he tried to piece together what could have caused such devastation. Karen wondered aloud whether the sword possessed its own consciousness. Forged from the tormented souls of deranged blacksmiths, this unique sword bristled with fury when compared to another. Its anger flared so intensely that it warned Karen, promising to sever his neck should he dare to make such a remark again. Confused, Karen questioned the sword's motives, puzzled as to why it would bother rescuing him only to threaten his life over something so insignificant. The sword, brimming with frustration, communicated that it had exhausted all of its stored mana to protect him from the blast. Without making that sacrifice, the sword would have already severed his neck. The sword expressed its weariness, making it clear that it was feeling tired. They began to consider whether mana could be absorbed through means other than battling foes, proposing that Karen's blood might serve as another source of mana. Karen came to the realization that the sword's desire for its wielder's blood could only mean it was a cursed, demonic weapon. Just then, several knights appeared, led by their commander, who announced himself as from the self-defense forces. Hands moved ahead and greeted in return. During their conversation, Karen slid his sword back into its sheath. The sword grumbled about losing its ability to speak when put away, but Karen responded with satisfaction, instructing it to remain silent and rest. Identified Karen as the grandson of Grand Duke Hallow, and assured him that his region would take complete responsibility for the regrettable situation. He clarified that the mayor had sent him to ensure the ducal family's safe passage, and Karen accepted his offer, requesting that he also help look after the numerous injured people. As the carriage moved along, the journey continued. Hans questioned Karen's decision to stay away from Blue Sea Castle, expressing concern that the threat might still exist, and reminding him that the investigations happening there would likely take a while. Karen offered Hans comforting words, aiming to put his worries at ease. He reassured him that he had already reached out to Sir, assuring there was no reason to be overly concerned. He quickly shifted the conversation, inquiring whether Hans had any knowledge about who the man was that had detonated himself. Hans explained that the person was a distinguished 6-star knight hailing from the Sultanate of. Karen started to reflect on how serious the situation had become. He questioned whether the non-aggression agreement his grandfather had once signed with the Sultanate was now at risk. Leo acknowledged that tensions between the Empire and the Sultanate had been growing worse, though he believed the situation was not severe enough to warrant an assault like this. Karen determined that behavior by itself gave enough reason to start a war. Inside the carriage, Karen observed Leo gazing at his hands, which were smeared with blood, his face frozen in disbelief. Lost in confusion, Leo realized he had missed Karen's earlier words, his thoughts swirling as he questioned why his hands wouldn't stop shaking. Karen assured him that his response was to be expected, since it was his first experience ending another person's life, and she acknowledged that adjusting to such an act was never easy. He explained to Leo that facing such emotions was an inevitable part of living. Not long after, a guard entered and informed everyone that their arrival in the autonomous territory of was imminent. As Karen entered the city, he gazed out the window, quietly marveling at the opulent and grand architecture surrounding him. The mayor offered a heartfelt welcome, expressing delight as the group arrived in the land of. The mayor felt a wave of relief wash over him upon seeing them arrive safely, and he assured everyone that his region would spare no effort in identifying the individual responsible for the incident. In addition, a promise was made to fully support the family's ongoing investigation. Karen cut him off, confidently explaining to the mayor that they were certain's territory had nothing to do with the assault. The mayor's expression noticeably relaxed as a result. Hans observed that the mayor seemed very different compared to his time as finance minister. In response, the mayor expressed remorse for ever agreeing to take on the troublesome role of mayor. He expressed regret for using casual language around the duke's grandson. Karen, feeling uneasy with excessive formality toward his seniors, encouraged him to speak freely. At first, the mayor paused, expressing uncertainty about speaking casually with someone from a distinguished ducal family. He eventually accepted Karen's offer with gratitude, though he quickly apologized after mistakenly addressing him by his first name. In an effort to shift the mood, the mayor proposed that they relocate to a different spot so their conversation could go on. Inside a secluded chamber, Karen pressed the mayor for answers, emphasizing that the destruction of the railway had been caused by explosives rather than magical energy. He clarified that explosives were accessible exclusively via the Military Supply Administration. The empire maintained such tight control that sneaking any out from within its borders was almost impossible. Cairn suggested his idea, speculating that the explosives might have been brought in from beyond the empire's borders, possibly originating from the Sultanate of. He pointed out to the mayor that only the empire and the Sultanate possessed the resources to create explosives of such superior quality. He also subtly suggested that the mayor would face humiliation if it turned out that traders from had a hand in the smuggling operation. The mayor could hardly believe how precise Karen's reasoning turned out to be. The mayor came to the unsettling conclusion that rejecting Karen's theory might make him appear complicit, so he reluctantly admitted there was a strong likelihood of smuggling involved. Deep inside, the mayor resented the foolish smugglers for forcing him into such a troubling situation. Just then, Karen reminded him of something important she wanted him to keep in mind. It was revealed that both the Sea Wolf Knights and the inhabitants of Blue Sea Castle suffered injuries during the event. The mayor understood that he had no way out. The reputation of the family for repaying kindness many times over, and settling scores even more fiercely, made it clear that refusing to help them would lead to his downfall. Trying to steer the conversation away from its current course, the mayor shifted his attention to Karen, inquiring about the health of her father. The person insisted they were very familiar with him, and even stated they had a strong connection with Karen's grandfather on her mother's side, Sir Gale. Karen offered a sarcastic smile as she observed the mayor begin to casually mention important names, a move that revealed his genuine skill as a politician. Just then an aide rushed into the room, carrying an urgent message from the capital. The mayor assumed it confirmed what he already suspected: the Imperial Guard had left. The aide explained that it involved more than just the Imperial Guard. The head of the Internal Revenue Service had personally led the 1st Special Division on a mission too. The aide disclosed that the commissioner's identity was Gale, a man infamous for being called the Demon King. Upon hearing the name Gale, the mayor's eyes widened in surprise as he questioned whether the legendary Sir Gale had arrived in person. He faced Karen and wondered whether she had expected this outcome. Karen confirmed this, sharing that his mother's father loved him deeply and would do anything to protect him if he ever faced trouble. Later that evening, members of the Internal Revenue Service's 1st Special Division entered the territory of, their presence casting a tense mood over the bustling city streets. Commissioner Gale guided the group forward, her serious demeanor hinting at possible trouble ahead. At the same time, Grand Duke watched the events unfold, having only recently gotten there. Noting the speed of his arrival, his attendant remarked on how quickly he had come, explained that he had hurried because the matter involved his grandson. At the same time, the merchants found themselves overwhelmed by frustration and bewilderment. The announcement of an unexpected tax investigation that evening caught everyone off guard, leaving them no opportunity to get ready. They expressed their dissatisfaction upon learning that the notorious 1st Special Division had been assigned to oversee the investigation. Inside the meeting hall, the atmosphere was tense as the mayor made efforts to soothe the restless crowd. Just then, Karen and his companion stepped into the room. Observing the situation, a respected senior merchant voiced agreement with the mayor, underscoring how serious the matter was. Spoke to the gathered merchants, making sure they understood just how serious the situation had become. He pointed out that the emperor's railway had been ruined, and also mentioned that the Grand Duke's grandson, along with people from Blue Sea Castle, had been targeted in the attack. He explained that the assault had been executed with explosives, which were likely brought in secretly via the trade guilds operating within its borders. After sharing this information, he questioned whether they now realized the gravity of their situation. The merchants froze in shock, scrambling to retreat as they insisted their intentions were simply to request additional time to get ready. Inquired about the merchant's identity, prompting him to reveal that he was Viscount Homer, a representative of the Homer trading group. Karen responded with composure, assuring that he would take it upon himself to inform his grandfather at the National Tax Service about the Viscount's identity. Overcome with fear, the Viscount pleaded for Karen to change his mind, confessing that his earlier words had been spoken without thought. Just then, news spread through the room that the 1st Special Division and the Commissioner had arrived. Gale led his team as they stepped inside. He declared that the tax investigation into every trade group would begin without delay. He stated that the tax authorities had been alerted to fortunes built on smuggling and avoiding taxes, and revealed that the Emperor had personally commanded a complete inquiry, insisting that all citizens assist fully. Leo leaned in close to Hans and quietly wondered whether the 1st Special Division was truly as intimidating as people said. In response, Hans clarified that this unit handled affairs involving influential merchants and aristocrats, and because of the formidable status of those they confronted, they had the authority to summon the Imperial Guard when needed. It became clear that their appearance was truly terrifying. Gale walked up to Karen with a friendly smile, noting how it had been 3 years since their previous encounter. Later, Gale and Karen found a quiet moment to talk alone. Gale expressed concern for his grandson's well-being, wanting to know if everything was truly all right. Karen offered reassurance, insisting that things were fine. When Gale wondered if Karen had any suspicions about what had happened, Karen shook his head and said he didn't. Gale suggested that the issue could be something happening within the family, but Karen quickly rejected this notion. She reasoned that if his uncles were responsible, they would have ensured nothing was left behind to indicate their involvement. He clarified that those responsible for the incident had intentionally left evidence at the scene. It seemed they had tried to make it appear as though the Sultanate was responsible. Gale wondered aloud whether his grandson planned to track down and deal with those responsible on his own, then cautioned him against taking such action. He reminded the young man that the world was enormous, filled with strong individuals, and warned that threats remained even here. He instructed him to remain silent for the time being, informing him they would depart for the capital the following morning, as commanded by the Emperor. He gave his word that the grown-ups would take care of the situation. Karen nodded with a gentle smile, making a quiet vow to keep his composure. As Gale turned and left, he silently predicted that a blackout was imminent, and it became clear to him that Karen had never planned to honor her word. Later that evening, Owen's house buzzed with movement as people rushed to pack a carriage with urgency. His wife leaned out from the carriage window, wondering if he planned to join them. He calmly promised that he would catch up shortly, then signaled for the carriage to set off. As the carriage rolled into the distance, Owen stood still, his family's voices fading behind him. He realized he had chosen to send them away before himself, and frustration welled up inside him as he thought about the predicament he was now facing. In another part of the city, Grand Duke stood atop a rooftop, surveying the scene below. A subordinate approached to report that their intended targets had begun to make their move. Upon hearing this, directed his team to carry out the cleanup swiftly and ensure that no errors occurred. At the same time, sat alone in his room late at night, carefully running a whetstone along the blade of his sword. Sir made his entrance and cut the conversation short, inquiring whether the other man intended to cause more problems. Karen recalled hearing that Commissioner Gale had prohibited him from leaving, and wondered aloud if intended to prevent him as well. Clarified that his sole purpose for being there was to pass along instructions from Grand Duke, the head of the family. Formally delivered the command to Karen, the youngest grandson in the family. The order required Karen to quickly identify those responsible and ensure they paid the blood price for the lives lost. He finished giving the order, directing Karen to demonstrate to everyone the true significance of the law at Blue Sea Castle. Karen's lips curled into a sly grin as she listened to the command. He expressed his loyalty by pledging to follow the orders of the family leader. Observed that the night was likely to stretch on for many hours. Disguised and blending in, Karen and Leo made their way through the eastern districts of. Leo couldn't hide his irritation, silently questioning the necessity of pretending to be a servant. They headed toward an area known for frequent unlawful transactions. Karen pointed out that the presence of two young nobles roaming this area alone, without any attendants, would likely attract unwanted attention and make others suspicious. Leo grasped the reasoning behind the decision, but he still muttered complaints under his breath about having to take on the role of the servant. Karen hushed Leo, explaining that they had nearly reached the location had described. Leo felt a wave of unease as he glanced around, thinking the place looked suspicious and unfit for people of their status. Karen noticed his discomfort, teasing him and suggesting he could leave if he was too frightened. Without warning, someone stepped out in front of them, demanding to know the reason for their visit. Moved ahead and introduced himself, mentioning that Sir had sent him. The man responded with a warm reception, expressing that it was a privilege to assist the young nobles. The man pulled back his hood to show his face and identified himself as. He then proposed that everyone relocate to a secure house that had already been set up for their protection. Within the safe house, assured everyone that the room was fitted with devices to block eavesdropping, allowing them to converse openly. Karen lived in. She inquired about the circumstances that led him to become an informant for the family. In response, explained that he was fulfilling a debt of gratitude to Sir, who had once helped him during his childhood. Karen immediately addressed the situation, informing the others that they possessed evidence of a plot targeting the family, involving the smuggling of explosives and the use of confidential details about their upcoming journey to the capital. Karen inquired whether was aware of who the culprit was, and confirmed that he did. He went on to clarify that, from the details he had collected, only two groups operated in the black market when it came to trading explosives. The two organizations were identified as the Group and the Group. However, it was mentioned that the Group was currently in the midst of pulling out of the black market. Karen inquired about the Group, prompting to explain that it consisted of ex-slaves willing to accept any work, provided it brought them profit. Shared an important update, disclosing that he had learned some members of the Group had departed the city earlier that same day. This revelation left Karen stunned. Noticed that the Group leaving right when the attack happened made them appear very suspicious. Karen carefully considered her choices. On one side was the Group, a faction currently pulling out of illegal dealings. On the other was the Group, made up of ex-slaves who eagerly accepted any job that promised a good profit. Leo observed that the limited time made it impossible to look into both groups, so he wondered where they should head next. Karen flashed a confident smile, convinced that the solution was clear. She believed that those who had nothing left to risk tended to act with the greatest disregard for consequences. With that decision made, the group set their sights on were promised to guide them to the city's black market. At the same time, Mayor Glynn engaged in a conversation with Commissioner Gale, questioning whether Gale truly felt at ease allowing Karen to handle matters independently. Gale explained that his son-in-law, Grand Duke Hallow, had written him a heartfelt letter, pleading for his assistance, which left Gale feeling as though he had no alternative. He went on to mention that wolves possess unique methods for handling their own kind. Gale also admitted that Karen had personally requested a favor from him, to invent any plausible reason to stall him and ensure he stayed out of Karen's path. Glynn couldn't help but admire his grandson's boldness, but worry crept into his voice as he pointed out that Karen was merely 13. Gale, however, brushed off Glynn's worries, confident that Karen's talents had already been demonstrated, insisting that prodigies like him shouldn't be limited by their age. Glynn remained firm in his belief that was a region constantly threatened by unexpected dangers, and he claimed that certain trading factions they were secretly paying off government officials in the capital to increase their power. He explained that even though Duke Hallow had decided to stay at the border, the influential noble families in the capital were keeping a careful eye on the family. was crowded with individuals eager to go to any lengths to earn their approval. Gale clarified that this was exactly why the emperor had stepped into matters, to stop the empire from falling under the control of people who cared only about their personal interests. Gale revealed surprising news, announcing that Sir Mason had arrived in. Glynn felt a surge of surprise as he questioned whether the man referred to the legendary, indestructible shield, known as Mason the Eight-Starred. Karen and his companions eventually reached the gateway to the black market, pointed out that this was the sole entrance and detailed that, if necessary, the doors could be locked from within, an extreme measure that Karen remarked upon with a sense of harshness. As the group prepared to go down, they were stopped by guards who had already captured and restrained. One guard announced that, by order of the boss, no customers would be admitted that day and instructed the group to turn back. When pressed for a reason, the guard claimed ignorance and politely insisted they should leave. As the questioning continued, the guard unsheathed his sword in a menacing gesture. Unfazed, Karen calmly provoked the guard, daring him to. After realizing that talking had no effect, and every effort to convince them had failed, the guard finally chose to use force as his only remaining option. Right as he was preparing to make a move, piercing command ordered him to stop. In the very next instant, lunged at him with lightning speed. While the ambush unfolded, famed blade, guillotine, spoke to its wielder in a mocking manner, ridiculing by calling him foolish. The creature, with a chilling indifference, made it clear that it would not lower itself to sample such inferior blood, considering it unworthy of its status. His eyes widened in astonishment, caught off guard by the sword's unexpected and confident words. It had never occurred to him that the weapon would express itself so directly. The sword went on to clarify that whenever its blade made contact with its master's hand, it possessed the ability to converse with him without restraint. The sword boldly turned its attention to, claiming he wielded it solely because its cursed power matched his wild and violent tendencies. The guard stood frozen in disbelief, stunned by the bizarre exchange unfolding before him, silently questioning actions and marveling at the impossible sight of a talking sword. In an instant, Leo darted forward with incredible speed, suddenly appearing right in front of the frightened guard. Silently admired the remarkable fighting abilities displayed, thinking they matched the high standards expected of the gifted youths from the noble house of. While fought, he observed that Leo appeared to be finding excitement in the midst of all the confusion and tension. Watched as Sir pressed the icy edge of his sword against the quivering guard's throat. In his mind, reasoned that Sir must have had a compelling purpose for letting roam the shadowy avenues of Thebes after nightfall. His voice, laced with mockery, questioned the guard, implying it was time to put his well-practiced hostage routine into action. The guard stood frozen in disbelief, struggling to comprehend S's words and desperately searching for a way to escape the predicament they now faced after all that had occurred. Was stunned that someone of noble birth and high status would go so far as to orchestrate a fake hostage crisis. However, remained calm and confidently assured that he would take care of everything on his own. At that tense instant, a serene yet commanding female voice broke through the chaos, firmly stating that the foolishness needed to end. The speaker, soon revealed as the enigmatic leader of directed to halt his intimidation of her devoted followers, with sharp sarcasm, questioned whether the leader genuinely valued her subordinates. Unfazed, she confirmed her deep appreciation, explaining that they had remained by her side through the hardest and darkest periods. In a tone laced with warning, the chief made it clear she would not permit a spirited young wolf-like to be destroyed within her own domain. Quickly realized that she was already aware of who they truly were. The leader then gestured for them to join her. Remained calm and remarked that there was still a gap in trust between them. The chief understood then that her trusted subordinate would need to continue acting as a hostage for some time. With a slight smile, she noted how much seemed to genuinely relish being in such hostage scenarios. She stated her intention to wait patiently indoors and instructed Cal, one of her reliable subordinates, to escort the visitors. Responding to this, commanded his captive to walk in front, and the hostage did as the leader demanded without hesitation. In another part of the city, the mayor and Gale shared a tense conversation. Concern filled the air as one of them questioned whether Sir Mason Ball, the experienced knight ranked 8th, was truly present in Thebes. The other person responded, agreeing that it was very likely true. It became clear to the first that the appearance of this knight could only mean that the emperor's wayward and unrecognized son, the infamous sixth prince, had also arrived in Thebes. The mayor turned to Gale, wanting to know whether the situation troubled him. Gale went on to clarify that the king himself had chosen Sir Mason from among the elite imperial guards, assigning him the challenging responsibility of safeguarding the sixth prince. Even though no one could foresee what the prince might do next, the mayor explained that the prince had probably arrived in Thebes to acquire unusual and diverse magical items through trade. However, what worried them most was the chance that might encounter the prince. Had a reputation for stirring up problems even when there was no reason to do so. Whenever things were calm, he took it upon himself to stir up some mischief. And his companions made their way into his hidden base. Inside, instructed his followers to welcome the newcomer, who was actually their captive. Once inside, they discovered a strange figure whose face was hidden behind a gleaming golden mask. Without pausing or showing any uncertainty, the masked stranger addressed directly, using his name. Stared in disbelief, puzzled by how this unfamiliar man seemed to recognize him. Yet beneath his confusion, a sudden awareness dawned. He sensed that something significant and perilous was on the verge of unfolding. The masked man could hardly contain his astonishment and joy upon encountering the renowned, a figure whose fame had reached distant places, especially in such an unlikely setting. Instantly recognized the overwhelming magical power radiating from the masked figure behind him. The force was so intense that it matched the presence of an 8th-rank knight, just like Or. Leo leaned in close to and quietly shared his thoughts, expressing his belief that this individual possessed extraordinary abilities rather than simple talent. Listened and found himself in complete agreement, recognizing the person's formidable presence. Faced the masked figure and boldly declared that he couldn't possibly be the leader of. Unbothered, the masked man explained that his only reason for being there was to visit his sister. Hearing this, realized that this must mean the masked man was her younger sibling. The man explained that he and were only pretending to be siblings and shared no real family ties. After offering his name, he watched as struggled to make sense of the unexpected information. Without warning, acted with remarkable speed, employing one of his signature moves to seize the masked man and turn him into a fresh hostage. Rather than showing any sign of fear, the man suddenly broke out into uncontrollable laughter. He summoned Mason, his companion during the night, searching for answers about the unfolding events. With a touch of sarcasm, he questioned how he had managed to end up as a captive in such a thrilling predicament. He realized the events in Thebes were far more exciting and entertaining than he had expected, reassuring himself that deciding to come to this city had been the perfect decision. Studied the faces of his captives, his golden eyes gleaming beneath his jet-black hair. By analyzing all the clues at hand, it became clear that a formidable knight of the 8th rank, known as Mason, was involved. Came to a startling understanding as he looked down at his arms. He was cradling none other than the 6th prince. The prince seemed thoroughly amused by the entire scenario, and without a hint of caution, proposed that they join forces to cause chaos in the royal palace. This suggestion led to conclude that the prince had utterly lost his sanity. At that instant, the leader of was revealed to be a formidable elf. She walked back into the room, balancing a tea tray with steady hands. With a bright, friendly tone, she wondered aloud whether any hostages had been exchanged while she was gone and politely asked someone to clarify the unusual scene before her. Revealed that he had swapped the previous hostage for someone of greater worth and significance. In response, the prince casually remarked that the first hostage likely wasn't all that important to begin with. The chief noticed sudden change in manners when he addressed her, prompting her to question his newfound politeness. In response, explained that elves deserved respect because they were older and wise, holding the knowledge of ages. Sensed an overwhelming surge of magical power radiating from the chief. A comparable magical aura radiated from the prince as well, leading to the conclusion that both individuals possessed considerable skill in magic. The chief's talent and strength stood out above all others. The chief addressed with a composed demeanor, explaining that if his visit was to uncover who supplied the explosives used against his house, her group was not to blame. She then proposed that they both sheath their weapons and engage in a proper conversation. Despite her suggestion, expressed his doubts about trusting her so readily. The chief responded with unwavering certainty, insisting that if she had assaulted the residents, she would never have made the mistake of leaving such obvious clues. As she spoke, she released a surge of astonishing magical energy that swept through the entire room. Quickly understood that she possessed magical abilities of great strength, placing her among 7th Circle mages or higher. The chief, wearing a confident smile, inquired whether he felt prepared to begin their discussion. Once everyone had taken their seats at the table, the chief once again emphasized her claim that the explosives involved in the terrorist attack did not originate from their group. She confessed that their involvement with explosives was solely to support Prince's unusual and daring experiments. The prince abruptly broke into their discussion, firmly insisting that the merchant group could not be responsible. He claimed they were too timid to commit such an act. Moving closer to in a noticeable way, the prince was then asked to move out of the way. The prince decided that such a level of familiarity was acceptable among friends, and requested to be addressed as from that point forward, a suggestion that secretly filled with anger. Mason cautioned to be careful with what he said, yet the prince dismissed the concern, urging Mason to loosen up and not take things so seriously. Mason quietly regretted how his younger brother's grandson had grown into such a bold and troublemaking youth. Questioned inwardly whether Mason had ever actually met his grandfather, Halo. Broke the uneasy silence by steering everyone's attention back to the original subject that had brought them together. Huled presented herself with formality and conveyed how deeply honored she felt to meet the grandsons of Grand Duke Halo, the continent's most renowned hero. Insisted again that the explosives did not belong to her group. Despite this, she kindly agreed to disclose who was actually responsible for the attack. She went on to explain that obtaining this valuable information came with a single, straightforward condition, something had anticipated all along. Urged her to clearly explain her situation, insisting she be direct and straightforward. Stated that her requirement was to develop a close friendship with. Instantly understood how important the request was, and recognized the significant political consequences it carried. Since directly aligning himself with the imperial family came with many dangers, he realized it could easily land him in serious trouble. He considered how others might distort the bond between the heir of a prominent duchy and a prince, knowing that no one would ever believe it was simply a pure and unplanned friendship. The prince brushed aside the political worries, expressing confidence that a friendship between them would bring greater advantages to the house than any potential drawbacks. Wondered aloud about the advantages that might come from forming this friendship. The prince went on to clarify that the House of Listen needed to act soon to regain its former standing, and he believed that forming this alliance would boldly signal their intentions to both the emperor and the powerful nobles at the center of power. For a fleeting instant, reconsidered his earlier judgment of the prince's sanity, suspecting he might not be entirely mad. Driven by curiosity, he questioned the prince about his reasons for taking such extreme and risky actions. Prince explained that his greatest wish was to irritate his father, admitting that his lifelong ambition was to become the most defiant and troublesome son he could be. Upon hearing this, silently his earlier thoughts, once more assuring himself that the prince was truly and utterly mad. Pressed him for an answer, pointing out that their time to decide was quickly running out. She clarified that the Imperial Guard accompanying the 1st Special Division was assigned a separate, independent mission. It seemed as though they were making little effort to investigate the assault on the grandsons, belonging to one of the Empire's most respected and long-established families. Thoughts lingered on whether the true motive behind the situation had ever crossed his mind. Quickly came to the realization that the guards were likely working together with the person responsible for the crime. Clarified that the guards' intentions were completely different from what wanted. Handed a file that detailed everything they had discovered about the suspect's actions and the sequence of events that had unfolded. She repeated her question, wanting to know if he was finally willing to agree to what she had proposed. In another location, a man with striking red hair instructed his subordinates to hurry and execute their tasks with exactness. He reminded himself that after the mission ended, the Imperial Guard would cover up any evidence, and his master would finally bestow upon him the noble rank he had always been assured. Joy flooded the man as he realized that the title he had long desired was finally within reach, and he silently promised to dedicate all his effort and faithfulness to his master. At the same time, he resented the Duke's sons for making it through the assault, and started to fear that he could become the next target for disposal once the mission ended. He took comfort in knowing he had ensured his family's safety before anything else. Just then, a subordinate rushed into the room, visibly shaken and overwhelmed by fear. He was informed that knights had invaded the place using force. Fear gripped the man as he anxiously speculated whether the Imperial Guard had come to end his life. Raised his voice in ridicule, calling out the Owen merchants for only having the courage to appear when night had fallen. Owen soon noticed that the intruders who had broken into his house were not members of the Imperial Guard, leaving him puzzled as he tried to figure out the reason behind the sudden turmoil. He instantly identified the group, his surprise growing as he understood they belonged to the House of Knights. Acknowledged who he was with an icy tone, identifying himself as the very noble whom Owen had once attempted to kill. With sharp sarcasm, remarked on the strange twist that someone who had plotted his murder would now go to such desperate lengths to defend his own family. Just then, Sir entered, and let his young master know that he had delivered precisely what was requested. Owen stared in utter, wordless terror at the blood-soaked sack the knights held. With a chilling, emotionless tone, questioned whether Owen's curiosity compelled him to discover the sack's contents. Owen's fear for his family's safety grew even stronger, making his terror intensify. Tossed the sack onto the ground at the man's feet, urging him to see for himself what was inside and verify it. Owen fell to the ground, crying out in agony for his family. Convinced that the bag held the bodies of his loved ones, moved toward the man and delivered a sharp slap to his cheek, demanding that he quiet down and examine the contents carefully. He taunted him, questioning whether the dismembered hands truly resembled those of his loved ones. Owen, feeling both confused and stunned, wondered aloud about the identity of the mysterious hands. In response, explained that they were the hands of assassins hired by Owen's own partners, who had ordered them to eliminate Owen's family and erase any evidence. Owen's eyes welled up with tears as gratitude for being saved overwhelmed him, yet before he could express his thanks, interrupted and insisted that he hold his gratitude for now. He recalled for him the part he played in the plot against the House of, emphasizing that his actions had led to the loss of innocent lives. Clarified that his decision to spare his family stemmed from their innocence, emphasizing they bore no blame, unlike Owen. Speaking with firm resolve, announced that Owen's fate would be to languish in the shadowy prisons beneath Blue Sea Castle, where he would endure relentless and straightforward torment for the remainder of his life. He instructed Sir to escort him out. At the same time, questioned the prince regarding the validity of the whispers circulating in the capital about the emperor's worsening condition. The prince acknowledged that these rumors had left the nobles restless and filled with worry. The unsettling announcement brought joy only to the aged men eager for conflict, who alone found reason to celebrate. He noted that tensions among the Imperial Guard were intensifying daily, as divisions deepened between those who favored the war and those who stood against it. Playfully remarked to the prince that, because of her actions, he now had a strong supporter on his side. He responded by suggesting that was just captivated by his own magnetism and appeal. Wittily pointed out that, back when they first got acquainted, he hadn't acted that way at all. The prince remembered the moment he had managed to flee the palace's schemes and betrayals, seeking refuge in the city of Thebes. His mother had been killed in a violent and merciless attack. Had Sir Mason not intervened just in time, his unwavering loyalty on full display, he too would have met his end alongside her. He explained that meeting had been the turning point in his life. Without her, he never would have discovered the world of magic or grown into the person he had become. Both mattered greatly to him, and soon would hold the same significance in his eyes. The long-quiet Grand Duke Halo's household was preparing to break its silence and take action at last. In a different moment, The mayor reacted with astonishment when expressed his daring intent to disclose the incident and the ongoing inquiry to the public. Gale cautioned that such an action would greatly tarnish their family's honor, questioning whether was certain about moving forward. The mayor also speculated whether planned to blame all the citizens of Thebes for what had happened. Offered the mayor comfort by promising that the responsibility would not be his to bear. He firmly committed to ensuring that those responsible would never imagine escaping the consequences of their terrible crime. In the eyes of the townspeople, the mayor would now be seen as a courageous leader who had fearlessly opposed wrongdoing. Recalled how Grand Duke Halo, the head of the family, had once given him a clear command to allow to act freely and not to get in his way. Remained uncertain about his intentions, but he chose to obey the instructions given to him without question. Chose to place his faith in for now, keeping a careful eye on the events that would unfold. Inside his impressive, formal office, Lord Halo learned of an urgent message sent by his young grandson. His assistant informed him that planned to make a public statement revealing the extent of the damage and the findings from the investigation into the attack. Without delay, Halo called for his father, Bali, to share the news about the letter's arrival and to explain the plan outlined within it. Halo outlined the strategy, stating that they intended to reveal the results of the investigation. This would result in the arrest of a well-known Thebes council member who had played a role in the assault. He emphasized that the announcement should make it appear as though the council was fully supporting the investigation to help ensure similar events would not happen again. After sharing his thoughts, he turned to Bali to hear what she thought about the plan. As Bali read the letter, a wave of surprise washed over him. The realization struck that such a daring scheme had the potential to upset the already delicate political situation in Thebes. He explained that the main purpose was to give more authority to the city's mayor, a figure who had long been overlooked and held little power. Halo nodded in agreement, pointing out that although the council members held great power, exposing one of their own as a terrorist would severely damage their reputation and leave lasting consequences. Halo considered the intricate personality of his grandson, recognizing a history marked by recklessness and impulsiveness. Yet, on this occasion, his grandson had managed to accomplish his vengeance with extraordinary skill and surprising success. He explained that this smart decision had allowed their family to expand their sway and strengthen their hold over Thebes. Despite his appreciation for Halo's strong belief in his talents, Bali couldn't hide his worry as a father. He gently pointed out that was just 13, questioning whether such responsibility might be overwhelming for someone so young. Halo firmly pointed out to Bali that it had been Bali himself who admitted to placing complete trust in his own son. He asserted with unwavering resolve that a wolf was destined to follow the way of its own kind, regardless of how perilous or challenging that journey might be. Halo recognized that any father would naturally be concerned about his child facing the harsh realities of the world for the first time. However, he reminded his father of the promise to trust him completely, encouraging him to hold on to that faith until the very end. Upon hearing this, Bali expressed his unwavering faith in his son, vowing to support him no matter what happened. Halo realized that, because of his actions, this event would become a strong and unmistakable message to every dishonest person residing in the capital. He glared at the members of the Imperial Guard, thinking of them as parasites desperately holding onto their authority. With frustration in his voice, he declared that if a particular individual were present, that person would have executed every last one of them without a second thought. Following this, Halo instructed Bali to get ready for the approaching storm, declaring that it was time for Listen to take action once more. Bali, ever loyal, assured Halo that he would promptly handle all the needed arrangements. The story moved to Thebes, where Mayor Green stood before a crowd in the bustling square of an important building, speaking to the assembled citizens with great excitement. He confessed how humiliated he felt by a council member's ruthless and selfish scheme to assassinate Grand Duke Halo's heir, the continent's most celebrated champion. Outraged, the gathered citizens raised their voices, calling out Green's name and insisting he take strong action against the crooked council. Green lifted his fist high, making a promise to the crowd that he would restore the city to its rightful people and dedicate himself fully to accomplishing that goal. From a balcony close by, stood alongside Leo and Leo's maternal grandfather, Gale, observing the unfolding events with keen attention. Leo remarked on how naturally the mayor commanded the crowd's feelings, evidently thriving in such a setting. Gale nodded in agreement, noting that Green's experience and talent as a politician were clearly on display. Leo wondered aloud to Gale whether every politician in the capital shared his traits. In response, Gale explained that a skilled politician always took advantage of any opportunities that came his way. He explained that Green's rise to a prominent position was no accident. It was the result of his remarkable talent and determination, which fueled his lofty ambitions. Leo revealed his respect for the mayor, acknowledging that the man possessed far greater cleverness and insight than his outward appearance suggested. Gale took a moment to reflect on everything that had happened. He was astonished that a plan so carefully crafted by a boy of just 13 years had managed to gain the endorsement of Halo, the notoriously stern leader of the Listen family. He came to the realization that the Grand Duke likely viewed talents as extraordinary, and this led him to question whether could possibly be considered for the line of succession after all that had happened. Gale finished reflecting by wondering if this choice would truly benefit the family's future over time. Upon hearing this, faced his grandfather and softly inquired about his well-being. Worried that he had involved his grandfather in a complicated situation closely tied to the family's affairs. Revealed that his mother had once told him how much Gale disliked blending his official responsibilities with his personal life, and now worried that he might have pressured Gale into going against his steadfast beliefs. When Gale heard what was said, she turned to and advised him that sometimes doing the right thing means setting aside one's own principles. Gale clarified to his grandson that he hadn't betrayed his own values in this situation, since the Emperor's goal was to limit the increasing power of Thebes. He offered words of comfort, urging the other person to set aside any concerns about the situation. She suggested to him that if he ever faced a moment where doing what was right conflicted with his own beliefs, he ought to choose what was right, even if it meant setting aside his principles. Afterward, Gale informed the group of his need to depart early, explaining that pressing responsibilities awaited him before his return to the capital. In response, Leo said goodbye, expressing hopes for Gale's safe journey and looking forward to seeing him again once they reunited in the capital. Later that evening, Leo stood side by side on the balcony, gazing out over the city below. Leo turned to his cousin, curious about what caused the townspeople to react so intensely to the mayor's stirring speech, and quietly inquired about the reason behind their powerful emotions. Answered by stating that the mayor had revealed plans to dismantle the long-standing authorities in the city. He went on to clarify that the downfall of these traditional leaders would open doors for those eager to rise, a prospect that naturally delighted them. Even so, Leo confessed that the intricacies of politics continued to elude him. In response, remarked with a hint of sarcasm that Leo's difficulty stemmed from being raised, pampered, and shielded from real-world challenges, much like a plant nurtured inside a greenhouse. Leo objected, reminding everyone that his family held the most wealth in their household. In response, his tone dripping with sarcasm suggested they resolve the issue through a ceremonial duel. Without hesitation, Leo declined the offer. That evening, Mayor Green gathered with Leo to rejoice in his recent success. Admired the mayor's inspiring speech, noting how it had rekindled hope and energy throughout Thebes. The mayor, however, was swift to acknowledge that it was who had provided both the justification and the chance for him to take action. The mayor let out a laugh, claiming he was simply being honest, while responded playfully that if that were true, he ought to be the thankful one. After that, the mayor brought up the knights with a note of hesitation in his voice. Responded by explaining that more troops had been dispatched from Castle to strengthen their protection. Impressed by this prompt action, the mayor commended the family for their quick and thoughtful judgment. Leo reflected inwardly, recognizing that this situation the intricate strategies of political maneuvering. Following that, the mayor acted as though he had been hosting them for quite some time, and insisted they should rest and get ready for their difficult trip to the capital the following morning. However, interrupted to reveal that they had brought a unique gift for him. The mayor, his curiosity piqued, inquired about the matter, prompting to reassure him that it was nothing remarkable. Because the mayor was expected to manage significant and confidential affairs, it was inevitable that he would require occasional financial resources to carry out his responsibilities effectively. The sight of the bag overflowing with gleaming gold coins left the mayor in utter disbelief. Shared that the gift represented a modest share of the earnings he and Leo had received from operating the mine in Sperony, and he requested that this matter remain confidential between them. The mayor felt deeply appreciative, expressing his heartfelt thanks to the young men and viewing them as the sole individuals who truly cared about his well-being. Leo stood off to the side, his anger evident as he reflected silently on the fact that he had never consented to give up his portion of the earnings. The following morning, while bags were being packed and for the journey to the capital, an aide approached, delivering the news that the Imperial Guard had been assigned to accompany them. His discomfort grew as he harbored distrust toward the proud and overbearing Imperial Guard. Sir informed them that the family's patriarch had personally given his consent, wondered aloud if would join their group, considering that Hans was still recovering from his wounds. Explained that although he wished he could help, his duty was to escort the prisoners and the injured. Therefore, the responsibility for guarding them in the capital would fall to Sir. When the name was mentioned, at just 28 years old, he had already achieved the remarkable feat of nearing 6-star status, and he was the son of Tails, his elder cousin. Became aware that his scheme to ignite chaos in the capital had grown far more tangled than he had anticipated. Under his breath, he muttered his frustration, recognizing that not everything was unfolding according to his desires. Without warning, a lively voice echoed through the air, addressing Enlil as little brother. A lavish, intricately designed car rolled into view, guided by a lively young man radiating enthusiasm. With a bright demeanor, he inquired if the others had already enjoyed a tasty morning meal. Feeling concerned, sincerely asked Sir if there was any way he could stay away from the capital, but responded with a firm and unwavering refusal.